Hello, and welcome back to Revenge of the Drive-In. Ordinarily, of course, we select two movies at random, but this time we are selecting the two films chosen by our patrons over at Patreon, and the two films are Jurassic Park 3 and Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Two films that, at least when I was a child, were incredibly disappointing to me. So... can't wait to dig into them. Jim, I don't know your experience with these two films other than the fact that you said Jurassic Park 3 was great.
Yeah, I did say that, yeah.
Do you still feel that way?
You know, that's a good question. I'll probably save that
Is it?
for...
Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably save that for the end. But I will tell you, my experience with Jurassic Park 3, this is wild. I forgot about this. When I was a kid, I loved dinosaurs. I had all kinds of dinosaur books. Okay. I loved watching things about dinosaurs. I loved Jurassic Park.
Who didn't? I mean...
Exactly. And when this movie came out, I think I was doing jiu-jitsu at a little dojo in Niagara Falls. And for Christmas, I remember they had a guy dressed as a jiu-jitsu Santa show up. And I think it was the guy who ran the dojo. So he showed up in a red gi.
It's Sonny Chiba.
Yeah, and he started kicking the shit out of everybody. But he showed up in a red gi with a black belt, and he just started handing out pre-wrapped presents to everybody. And the present I got was Jurassic Park 3 on VHS. And I remember opening it, and there was a silvery kind of cover with the claw mark 3 on it. And I was just
it was just kind of neat.
Oh my god, Mom, look what I got. It wasn't until years later that my mum was telling me that the guy who ran the...
Hey, this movie kind of sucks.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so...
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with you. Yeah, I'll agree with you.
Okay, here's my experience with Jurassic Park 3, because like you, I loved Jurassic Park, and I was obsessed with dinosaurs at the time. I probably, in my heyday, I'm talking 8, 9 years old, around the time when this movie came out, I probably could have named a couple hundred of them. I can't do that now. But I read so many books. We used to rent VHSs of just educational dinosaur videos all the time from the library. So I was really into dinosaurs. Jurassic Park was my favorite movie. Jurassic Park 3 comes out at 2001 at a very particular time. This was kind of the end of an era for me. It was actually an era that ended, that kind of crashed and burned a few years later, actually. But... this was a time period where every movie I saw in the theater, I liked. Every movie that was new. Just throwing an example out there. I think Men in Black 2, came out in 2002. I loved that movie when it came out. It's really not very good. It's not, awful. Another example, Star Wars Episode 1. I'm 6 years old. I loved it when it came out. I thought it was awesome. When Lost World, Jurassic Park came out, I'm like, this is great. This is better than the first one. It was just the appeal of seeing something new and also combining with sort of the theater experience. To be perfectly fair, Jurassic Park 3, I had a different cinema experience going to that because I saw it at a drive-in, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
It was double billed with Pearl Harbor. And I remember that because... I fell asleep during Pearl Harbor because Pearl Harbor's a long movie, but that's a long night for a kid, for an 8-year-old kid.
Yeah, that's
and my dad
a 5-hour
was going to
night.
wake. Yeah, my dad was going to wake us up at the actual battle scene, and then the screen went out as the planes are launching, and so we got vouchers to come back later, and But even then, even in that time period where I loved The Phantom Menace, I loved The Lost World, I loved Men in Black 2, something was off about Jurassic Park 3. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It was an anomaly for me at that time period because still, it was just it was the one blip that this is the one movie I didn't like seeing in the theater. This time period for me really came crashing down in about 2006, 7, 8, with the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse being the first Pirates of the Caribbean sequel, Shrek the Third, epic movie, and the Day the Earth Stood Still remake. I'm I don't know if I like movies anymore.
Yeah, and that's that. Those are four pretty bad movies.
Yeah, oh god, I hate those pirate sequels so much. But
it just got worse and worse as it went on, and they're continuing it, which is amazing.
Who knows? But anyways, I think it was around that time period that I actually kind of reached back into the past, and that was when I started watching westerns, John Wayne movies, Clint Eastwood movies, and I'm like, okay, not everything is Shrek the Third. This is good. So that kind of rebuilt my faith in humanity. Okay, so we are talking about Jurassic Park 3. This is a film that came out in 2001. It is not directed by Steven Spielberg. It does not star Jeff Goldblum, who was really the only returning of the main characters, because like John Hammond, more or less a cameo in the second movie. So we got Sam Neill back, and we got Laura Dern back in a diminished capacity. Jurassic Park 3 was written by 3 people.
That's not good.
Well, here's the thing. One of them is an Academy Award-winning screenwriter, Alexander Payne, who is probably my favorite filmmaker working today. He's the director of About Schmidt, Sideways, Nebraska, The Holdovers. I think he's made like one mediocre movie. Every other movie he's made is great. The problem is that's him as a director. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't always write his movies, but he has written or co-written a lot of them. And his movies always have like perfect scripts. And his direction, his almost like sardonic direction, perfectly matches those scripts. I'm not saying he could have directed a better Jurassic Park movie than Joe Johnston, the guy we have doing it, but clearly not working within his wheelhouse. Alexander Payne writes funny, depressing comedies. He does not write dinosaur adventures well. No. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know why he did this. If this is such a weird person to write this movie.
And what else has Joe Johnston done?
On paper, anyways, not a terrible choice to make a third Jurassic Park movie, because he's kind of a Spielberg light, or at least he was. I think he might have done Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. He did The Rocketeer, which is sort of Indiana Jones for kids, kind of. And then he did Jumanji, which I think is kind of Jurassic Park for kids in a lot of ways.
Yes, and you're right about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. He also did Captain America, the First Avenger.
Yeah, that was what he did after that. I don't know what he's done otherwise. Joe Johnston, on paper, not a terrible choice to direct this film. Spielberg had kind of picked him to direct like a third Jurassic Park movie like a long time ago, but then he was also thinking about like, hey, maybe I'll do one. And the San Diego sequence with the T-Rex in The Lost World, that was actually supposed to be a sequence for the third Jurassic Park movie, but then as they're making that movie, Spielberg's like, I'm not making a third one of these. Like, you can imagine, it's just exhausting. You're shooting out in 100-degree heat, a lot of outdoor stuff. It's wet, it's rainy. Animatronics are a pain in the ass. Like, not the most fun movies to make necessarily.
I think Spielberg, because I think we can both agree that the original Jurassic Park is a fantastic movie.
Yes, absolutely.
And something that this movie seems to lack is the heart.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
of what made the original movie special. Even the second one, I'm not the biggest fan, but I kind of found a bit more appreciation for it.
The wonderful thing about Jurassic Park, the original Jurassic Park, I think it's one of the best blockbusters ever made. It's a really exciting movie when it actually gets to the action stuff. It's a movie with a very strong theme. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily have the best characters, but at least there's Ian Malcolm, who's like really fun, and you know, the Sam Neill hating children and then having to go around with children for most of the movie, that's actually kind of fun too. The characters aren't awful. Yeah, really strong theme, and that sense of wonder that Spielberg has been able to capture better than anybody else, and that John Williams has been able to capture better than anybody else. Now, you can't do that with a sequel. You can't. You can aim for it, you can try, but it doesn't have the same feeling. That scene in the original when they first see the Brachiosaurus is like a perfect scene.
Oh, yeah.
And The Lost World, their version of that was with the Stegosauruses. It kind of feels the same, but then they make it into an action scene almost immediately, and it's like, okay, this isn't quite what I wanted. But where I get the wonder in that movie is that herbivore hunt scene.
Yes, yeah.
That's the best scene in that movie, I think. I think Jurassic Park 3, it's not as awful as I'm not even going to say as I remember it, because I never thought this is like one of the worst movies ever. I've always hated it, because I just hate what it is, what it stands for. But this movie does a lot of things like shockingly wrong. And I'm going to say one of the biggest is they aim for that scene of wonder an hour into the movie after a dozen people have been killed, and it's actually about 5 seconds after they are mourning the supposed death of Billy. That's when they have the Wonder Brachiosaurus scene, and it's like, what is this?
Yeah.
Why did they do that? Why did they put that scene there?
I know, and at that point, there's like 15, 20 minutes left of the movie.
Yeah, and that's like, another thing to note. This is a short movie for like a The other Jurassic Park movies are, the first one I think is over 2 hours. The second one,
And I'm sure this one was like an hour 35 or like an hour 30 or something.
yeah. So Lost World is about 2 hours 10. This is 92, and some of that might be another thing I'm going to say. But again, Joe Johnston on paper not the worst person to direct a Jurassic Park movie. In praxis, probably didn't have the skills that Spielberg had in order to pull this off, right? You'll notice how this film basically doesn't have a climax. Mm-hmm. I learned recently that's because they ran out of money. There was going to be something else, but they literally ran out of money. And so that might be part of why it's shorter. But I'm also thinking, like, God, if we just had Spielberg, Universal would have been a lot more comfortable throwing more money at this, you would think, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if it is a not having Spielberg thing. It's interesting that a third movie in a successful franchise that people are interested in ran out of money. I mean, because after this movie, we didn't see dinosaurs on the big screen in terms of a Jurassic Park movie for over a decade.
Almost 15 years, yeah, over a decade. And then it's funny, it happened again. Jurassic World, when Jurassic Park was rebooted with Jurassic World, that was like one of the biggest movies ever, like the original Jurassic Park. And then each one was, after that, was like a bigger and bigger flop.
Contrary to you, I loved this movie when I was a kid, and rewatching it, I was like, oh, like, this is kind of a bad movie. And I didn't realize that, because, again, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, this is such a cool movie.
Just to be clear to our listeners, I am going to point out things I like about this movie, too. It's not going to be a complete shit fest, just for the record.
But they made a mistake with this movie, and I'm wondering if this is where Jurassic World kind of...
I think I know where you're going with this, but I'd like you to finish.
One of my biggest complaints, because like I think the idea of like a Jurassic World theme park, aping off the idea of a failed Jurassic Park theme park, is a great idea. But you have to treat the animals
like animals.
Like animals, like they're yeah.
Well, I don't think you have to. It's just that that's what the first movie did, and that's clearly the best one. I think you can make just a monster movie, but it's almost like just in comparison with the original, they're more frustrating. But
this one actually starts off as a pretty good monster movie. In like the first 15 minutes that they're on the island.
Oh, well, I think the opening scene's kind of laughable, but okay, whatever.
Okay.
It's poorly acted. It's bad green screen.
We'll get there eventually, okay? We'll circle back.
Eventually, we'll get to the first scene. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You heard that here, folks.
I don't like how the quote-unquote climax of this movie is, giving the eggs back to the raptors and then running out onto the beach. In that scene, you have Sam Neill. He goes, oh, they're challenging us. Everybody kneel down. And he's treating them like they're fucking, like, wild dogs. And then that's what these Jurassic World sequels picked up on. They just started treating the velociraptors like they're trainable wolves.
Well, yeah.
And that's like Chris Pratt's character, and I fucking hate that. And I hate Chris Pratt's character. I hate that they treated these dinosaurs like they're trainable. Like, you look at a seal, and you go, that is a fat, fluffy ocean dog. That looks like it's trainable. You look at a velociraptor, a movie velociraptor, and you go, that thing is fucking terrifying, and I don't want that anywhere near me, even if somebody said it's trainable.
I mean, but we've had lion tamers and stuff, though. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not going to say that's the problem with any of the movies in the series.
So, like, the first Jurassic World made Chris Pratt this, like, super cool...
Navy SEAL.
Yeah, adventure-y character who can train these dinosaurs. Whereas, like, Sam Neill, he never knew how to deal with them. He was just like, maybe this will work? I don't know.
He did know about the T-Rex. He did know that not to move with the T-Rex, which I actually like that they do that in this. When they come across the T-Rex, he's like, nobody move a muscle. And of course everybody starts running because how could you possibly listen to him in that with facing that?
But then, like, it's almost like they took all the bad ideas from the second two movies and then started putting them into the sequels, into the Jurassic World sequels.
Into the worlds. Yeah, okay.
Like, all the InGen stuff, like, all that shit is boring. Nobody gives a fuck about the InGen stuff. People like the dinosaurs, and people being chased by dinosaurs, and theme parks going wrong. That's what people like.
I mean, but to be fair to Jurassic World, which I don't think is a great movie, I think it's the best of the sequels, which isn't saying that much. It's the only one other than the first to have an amusement park gone wrong. And it's actually a fully operational amusement park as opposed to the original Jurassic Park. Mm-hmm. They did some of the stuff that you said you wanted. Some of it. The Jimmy Buffett cameo, classic.
Yeah, we're drinking the margarita, right?
Yeah. He's grabbing his margaritas as the pteranodons are attacking, yes.
But I mean, I think that is a great way for the series to go. You have a fully operational theme park that falls apart. And it becomes this monster movie, right? Where all of these animals who shouldn't be caged escape and kill people, right? But then after that, they take this series down like this InGen road. This like I never even saw the second two movies.
But I'm gonna stop you because I have something to say about this that I'll get to when we get to the actual review part of this movie of Jurassic Park 3, which is a film that opens with. You assume it's a father-son. It's a stepfather going parasailing near Isla Sorna. Mm-hmm. I guess the idea is we're going to see if we can see dinosaurs. They even have a video camera. But also, like, you see the island, and it's, like, so densely packed with trees, and it's like, yeah, there's no way anyone would ever see anything. Mm-hmm. But they're up high. They're above the clouds. And then, the boat shakes, and then once the clouds kind of clear, they see everyone is gone, is dead. There's some blood on the boat. We never know what creature attacked. Was it a Spinosaurus? Was it a Mosasaurus? We don't even know there are Mosasaurus. Was it Pteranodons? Probably not. They're in the bird cage right now.
Yeah,
we don't know.
Presumably
it's a
some
lazy, it's a silly
dinosaur.
I think the idea is probably a Spinosaurus because Spinosaurus is a fishing predator. Hence the long, thin snout. It's kind of like some of those alligators. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming it's probably the Spinosaurus. Anyways, the boat is about to crash. And so they unhook themselves, and they float off to the island, and that's that. Then we meet up with Alan Grant, Sam Neill. He's actually hanging out with Ellie Sattler, Laura Dern. I've always thought one of the weakest parts of the original movie is that those two are in a relationship, and it's so... You can completely overlook it because it's so unimportant. But of course, here, it's not like they're married or anything. She's got a kid, but she's got a husband. He's just there to say hi. Because, he's speaking at some college that's presumably close by to her place. But and this is like the first time they've connected in a long time. And I actually like a lot of the stuff with the Alan Grant character early on in this movie. I like when he's correcting the kid about how he's playing with dinosaurs. Plus, I had that Triceratops toy. At least early on in this movie, he's actually kind of a more fun character than he is in the original. In the original, he's just kind of like, he's a pretty generic protagonist. Like, his only characteristic is he doesn't like children.
Yeah, in the original, he's paleontologist man. Mm-hmm. In this, he's like world-traveled, world-wearied paleontologist man who wants nothing to do with dinosaurs.
No, he still wants something to do with dinosaurs. He just doesn't want to see them alive.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly.
But they make a point in capturing that he's very boring. When he eventually is speaking at the college, we see people like walking out, and that is not even a lecture, it's like a keynote. At the end, it's like, okay, what questions do we have? And like everyone raises their hand, and he's like, how about questions that have nothing to do with Jurassic Park? And most people put their hands down, and he's like, and also nothing to do with the event in San Diego. And then like everyone lowers their hand, and he's like, I had nothing to do with that anyways. But they do ask a few questions. His latest discovery, it's a bit silly, but he's still working on raptors, which means he's still in the wrong continent. Because he's at the Museum of the Rockies, and raptors were in Mongolia.
Close enough.
Apparently, they were much smarter than he had previously realized, and that's what he's telling Ellie, and that's what he's giving his speech on. And there is a kind of a silly moment where he's like, it's possible that if it weren't for the mass extinction, that raptors and not humans could have been the dominant species. And it's like, ugh.
Yeah, come on.
I don't know, man.
That's almost like a South Park bit, like when South Park had otters, like...
Yeah, it's like a Planet of the Apes thing, and it's, I don't know. But over at his dig site, he's got a new partner, and this is Billy. Billy sucks.
Yeah, Billy does suck.
Billy is annoying. He's a boring character. He goes by Billy even though he's in his 30s, which is a problem. That's a red flag right there. You got to go by William at that age.
Or Bill.
Right, Jimmy? Yeah.
Fuck you.
But yeah, He has a silly scene where he's mansplaining what fossils are to this one girl. And then he also shows, and this is another dumb thing, they're talking about how they're like, oh, we need funding. We're like, oh, we don't have anything. But then he's got this 3D printer, which is state-of-the-art technology. They don't even call it a 3D printer because 3D printers didn't exist.
I know, and this is what, like 2000, 2001?
Yeah, and they model and sculpt with computers a resonator, like the velociraptor like voice box, and when you breathe into it, it makes raptor noises, and it's like, those are noises that we've heard, those are the noises that Alan Grant has heard. And it's like, maybe if you had spent your money a little wiser, you wouldn't need to shill out for William H. Macy cash. I don't know.
I'm gonna tell you, when I was doing my master's and I wanted a 3D model of a building, like a small model, like my two fists put together size, they told me it was going to be like 860 pounds.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, fuck off. I was like, no, I won't.
Heavy.
Never mind. Fuck off. You're an idiot.
William H. Macy shows up, very similar way to John Hammond visiting him at the dig site, and he's like, hey, I'd love to have dinner with you. I'm Paul Kirby of Kirby Enterprises. And then they meet at a bar, and Billy goes along with it, and Billy encourages Sam Neill to go to this, almost thinking that, like, was Billy approached before? If he was every bit as naive as Sam Neill is here, so I don't think that's the case.
Well, I think there's a line later where he says something like, "If I had known they were going to do this, I wouldn't have tried to get you to come," or something.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, Paul Kirby and his wife, Amanda Kirby, played by Téa Leoni, they claim to be explorers, adventurers, thrill seekers, and they're like, hey, we've climbed K2, we've done all this crap, and the one thing we really want to do for our anniversary is go to Site B. And Sam Neill's like, that's a dumb idea. And he's like, well, we would just take a plane over it. It's a restricted area, but we have special permission from the Costa Rican government. We can fly over there. It'll take 15 minutes. Everything will be fine, and we can come back. And then he's like, well, don't worry, you'll be well compensated. Like, he basically just gives him a blank check, and he's like, hey, we'll fund your research. So, Alan Grant is greedy as hell. I love it. He just goes along with this.
Well, it's funny because there's a scene earlier at the college when somebody asks him if he would go to any of the islands, and he says something along the lines of, like, nothing on heaven or earth could make me go to these islands.
Well, yeah, because someone's asking about, like, what's the point of paleontology when we have actual dinosaurs? Like, can't you go study those things? And he rightly points out, and this I don't think is really mentioned in too many of the movies, but he's like, these aren't actual dinosaurs. These are theme park monsters. They were dinosaurs bred with frog DNA. Like, yeah, I don't think he mentions frog DNA specifically, but he kind of hints at these wouldn't really be scientifically reliable. But then somehow the resonator that they print still works just fine, and yeah, who knows. But yeah, so we kind of cut to, he's on the plane. It's him, Billy, the two Kirbys, and then three other characters, one of whom's a pilot, one of whom is Michael Jeter, a.k.a. the clown from Air Bud, who I actually really like in this movie, because they, like, they present him as, like, a mercenary, and you're thinking, that is not the guy I would cast as a mercenary. But then when the twist comes, oh, he's a booking agent. Someone dropped out. He's like a temp, and that's great, because he does not look like a mercenary, and that's perfect. And then there's another guy who kind of looks like a mercenary, and he claims he knows the Kirbys through their church. There is, of course, on this scene, perhaps the most infamous scene in Jurassic history, when Alan Grant drifts asleep and seemingly wakes up. The plane is empty, and then he turns, and there's a velociraptor next to him that speaks, and he says Alan, and then, of course, he's being woken up by Billy saying Alan. An embarrassing scene, to be sure. A lot of the reasons why I hated this movie when I was younger are dumb. I acknowledge that. One of the reasons that I really hated is I hated that they changed the look of the raptors. Now, in this scene, again, not that this matters, it's just a dumb dream sequence. It's 10 seconds long. But he is picturing the velociraptors as they are in Jurassic Park 3. Those are not what they looked like in the first one. They were not that color. They didn't have the little feather antenna things.
Yeah.
Also, just on a side note, dinosaurs having feathers. Dinosaurs having feathers is my Christopher Columbus. The way that some people are in denial about Christopher Columbus being a terrible human being and committing such awful atrocities, even though we, like, widely know it by now. That's dinosaurs with feathers. I know it's true. I know it's accurate. I don't care. I grew up in an era where dinosaurs didn't have feathers. I can't accept it. I cannot accept it. I can accept Columbus being an asshole. I cannot accept dinosaurs having feathers. To be fair, they're not full-on feathers, but the alpha male velociraptor does have a little thing going on up top.
Yeah, and also, actually, I was listening to this thing where they were talking about dinosaurs recently, and they were saying that, dinosaurs were probably covered in feathers or had different feather patterns, but then they also said because of paleontology and the Victorians and people in, like, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they kind of, like sucked the skin close to the skeletons, so they probably didn't look like that at all. They were probably a lot chunkier and covered in feathers. And I was like, can you stop ruining dinosaurs, please? Let them look scary.
Yeah, that's the thing. They just look less cool if they look more like birds. I understand anatomically they're more bird than reptile in terms of their skeletal structure, but they're scarier.
Yeah.
They're scarier, more reptilian looking. They just are. And again, for a movie like this, which is essentially a monster movie, we don't need scientifically accurate dinosaurs by any means. Velociraptors are about 4 times as big as they were in real life, if not more. Velociraptor is about the size of a turkey.
Yeah, I would love to see a scientifically accurate Jurassic Park movie where somebody recreates the stories beat for beat, but with...
I think I've seen an edit of that with I don't know if it was AI or Photoshop, but it was just I think it was the scene in this movie where the raptors are kind of chasing them through that herd of Parasaurolophuses and stuff, and it's it was just raptors, but they were all feathery, and it's okay.
See, I think I'd be okay with it, but if they looked really fat, like people are now saying that they were, really chunky birds, I think that'd be fantastic.
So, they fly over the island. The pilots turn off the radio when they're receiving some kind of warning, but they fly over the island, and then Alan realizes he's supposed to kind of narrate and be a tour guide, and he's like, oh, over here you look at this, and and then you see the alpha male up there, and it's so right off the bat oh, we're talking about alpha males now. And then the plane's getting ready to land, and Alan is throwing a fit. He's like, no, you can't land here. And then in a shot that was always silly to me, it's a POV from Alan. He's looking at William H. Macy, and William H. Macy's like, hold on, I can explain. And then Mr. Cooper stands up, who's behind him, and he hits him over the head, and it's a very silly shot, in part because William H. Macy's reaction is just kind of funny, and then also the camera kind of fades to black as it goes, it's very, very, it's a comedy shot.
Yeah.
Anyways, he comes to, they're already landed, they're on some kind of landing strip, and Téa Leoni's out there with a megaphone. They're looking for Eric, who's their son. The kid that we saw, who's, by the way, the bully kid in The Sixth Sense, the kid that was in commercials.
Oh.
Not a bad kid actor in The Sixth Sense, not very good here, but whatever. Also, just, why did they do this, Jim? Why does every goddamn Jurassic movie have to shove fucking kids in your face?
You know what? Well, the first one made sense.
The first one had them. And guess what? They were tolerable, and it worked for the Alan Grant character, because his character arc was, I hate kids, they smell, and then he protected them, and that was a fun bit for his character.
Yeah.
And then we have the Jeff Goldblum's black daughter in The Lost World, and then we had kids in Jurassic World, which were okay, they weren't bad, but
yeah, but even again, Jurassic World kind of makes sense because it's a theme park, right? I mean,
yeah,
so it definitely makes sense. But you're right, in the second one, they shoehorned her character in. They came up with a way to get her on the island and spin around on a bar and kick a velociraptor.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, and then this movie, the thing that annoys me about this movie and shoehorning this kid in, it's we quickly find
the plot revolves around the kid. It's not he's truly shoehorned. I'm just talking in general, we don't need kids.
No, we don't, and especially
I'm not even talking about in movies.
But this movie, though, Patrick, if somebody listen, if you were a father. Okay, because, spoilers, the Kirbys are divorced.
Yeah.
And the guy at the beginning of the movie that was with Eric is the stepdad.
The stepfather, yeah.
Turns out Eric and the stepdad have been missing for 8 weeks.
Yes,
on a
that was shocking
island.
because as you're watching this and you realize they land and they're looking for the kid, you think, holy shit, was he able to organize all of this in 2 days? He must be rich. But no, it was 8 weeks ago. Yeah, I would have given up. I'm sorry.
That's exactly it. Now, that's what I was going to ask you. If somebody had come to you and said, hey, your son and his stepdad...
I wouldn't have even assumed he was eaten by a dinosaur. I would have assumed he just drowned at sea.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and that's like the best case scenario. I would have been like, oh yeah, the boat crashed and sank, and he drowned in the ocean in his parachute. And if that didn't happen, then he was eaten by a dinosaur somewhere. And no, I'm not gonna try to find.
Or perhaps
him.
eaten by the stepdad.
Yeah.
A Count Ugolino situation, to reference Dante's Divine Comedy.
But yeah, so that's shocking. You know, I would have given up. I would have been like, well, I can always make a new kid.
Anyways, there's a big roar, and they're like, oh, what is it? We've got to go. And then Billy's like, what is that, a T-Rex? And Sam Neill says, no, sounds bigger. And I'm like, what, really? First of all, it's barely bigger than a T-Rex. It probably has less mass. It might be taller and longer. T-Rex is beefier. Mm-hmm. But, like, come on. It sounds bigger than a T-Rex.
Yeah, like you know.
Yeah. The only time he came across a T-Rex, Jeff Goldblum wouldn't shut the fuck up. He probably never even heard that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're all getting back on the plane except for Cooper. Cooper is out there. He fires a few shots and then is running through the woods with like an injured arm. And so they're taking off, and he's standing in the middle of the runway, and they have to like take off to fly over him. Meanwhile, the Spinosaurus comes out of the woods, grabs him with the mouth, and then also kind of scrapes the plane, so the plane immediately crashes in the trees. Spinosaurus, slightly bigger than the T-Rex, again, basically the same size, longer snout, more crocodilian, if you will. The big sail on the back, sort of Stegosaurus, but all in one, not like a bunch of different ones.
Now, see, I was going to say I like this scene because you don't actually, like, because
this scene's fine. I don't have a problem with this, yeah.
Yeah, and, like, this is technically the first dinosaur you see of the movie, not including the Velociraptor on the plane.
Or anything that they were looking at from the plane. We've already seen like 100 dinosaurs. Yeah, this is the first one we've seen up close.
Exactly, yeah.
And we've barely seen it. It was really brief.
Exactly, and that's what I liked about it. It just, you heard it roar, you heard people firing guns at it, and then you only catch a quick glimpse of it as it darts out of the tree line and eats a guy on the runway. And you're like, wow, that's neat. And this is where it's kind of like a horror movie. You're like, wow, this is a great killer. You know, give him a machete, and he's unstoppable.
Yeah, but an issue I have with this movie is it's the Spinosaurus movie. It's like all the Spinosaurus.
Oh, I know. And you know what? Can we?
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a shame what they do to the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Yeah. I think that's what you're going to say.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
So they crash into the tree, and they're trying to get out, but they're in a tree. And then the Spinosaurus comes in, kind of knocks the tree down, eats the pilot, or grabs him out, and then throws him on the ground and steps on him.
Yeah.
Love the animatronics in this scene.
Yeah, they look great.
Love them. I think the CG somehow looks a little bit worse than the other two movies, but the animatronics are as good as ever. Mm-hmm. And then so the plane's on the ground. The Spinosaurus kind of rolls it around. They eventually get out and run. And the Spinosaurus crashes in between a tree like an idiot. And that shot looks bad. That is there's some not great green screen in this movie.
Yeah.
That I probably wouldn't complain about were it not a sequel to two films with some of the best visual effects in motion picture history.
Yeah, there's a lot
because it's not, like, awful.
No, I mean, it's passable, but it certainly hasn't aged nearly as well as in the other two movies.
So then they're walking through the woods. And by the way, I keep saying woods. It feels more woods than jungle. They wanted it to look more like darker and damper and just kind of grosser. They didn't want it to look like warm and inviting. And so like the lighting is different and you just like there's like leaves on the ground everywhere and stuff. And I don't know. I don't love the look of it, but that's fine. But they're walking through, and then they come across the Tyrannosaurus Rex eating some prey. And that's the, don't move a muscle, but then they all run. And then the T-Rex and the Spinosaurus fight. The fight's kind of fun. It's a pretty short one. The T-Rex doesn't put up a great fight. Spinosaurus kind of gets rid of him pretty quickly.
And then the Spinosaurus does a T-Rex roar. In the sense that it has the triumphant roar.
Yeah, the triumphant roar, yes. Which is the King Kong originated that after taking out the T-Rex. But... yeah. Couple issues with this scene. I think it makes sense that a Spinosaurus could win this just on the arms alone, able to kind of throw hands a bit more.
Yeah.
I do think just the T-Rex's weight would be a problem, but the biggest problem with the scene is it comes 30 minutes into the movie. This should be the climax, and it should be longer, and like that's one thing Jurassic World did right. Jurassic World, A, we got to see the T-Rex win, which is what we all want because this is the dinosaur that we all grew up with. B, that's the climax of the film. It's T-Rex and Velociraptors against the fake dinosaur, the Indominus Rex or whatever, and that's awesome. Like, say what you will about that movie, that is a very fun, even if you don't think the scene's great, it's a very fun concept for a scene, for a climax to a film. Yeah, now when this scene happens, I'm taking myself back to Drive-In Movie Theater 2001. Okay, a T-Rex was killed, that sucks. But hey, we had 2 adults in the Lost World, and we had a kid who's probably, if not fully grown, bigger than that wimpy piece of shit kid T-Rex that we had in the last movie. I'm fully expecting the T-Rex to be back.
Oh, yeah.
And it just never happens. It never happens. It's the Spinosaurus show with a couple raptor cameos. Listen, nostalgia's a hell of a drug. I don't think when I say I'm disappointed by the T-Rex, I think it's less nostalgia for the first movie and more nostalgia for what the T-Rex is. The T-Rex is the most famous dinosaur in the world by a billion. You know, it's not the biggest predator we've had. Again, the Spinosaurus may be slightly bigger, Baryonyx might be slightly bigger, Carcharodontosaurus and Giganotosaurus, which I'm not sure were discovered by the time of the first Jurassic Park movie, were certainly bigger. But the T-Rex is the king. I mean, it's in the name.
Exactly, yeah. Well,
like, there's nothing is cooler than a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Like, it's just we want more of the T-Rex. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then also even the roar of the T-Rex sounds so much cooler than that of the Spinosaurus.
I agree.
But I think the biggest problem is, in the first movie, really the only dinosaurs that were hunting people in the first Jurassic Park were the Velociraptors, when you had that scene where they had to turn the power back on and stuff like that. But they weren't even really hunting people, they were just in the building, and they wanted to eat people. You know what I mean?
This is the definition of hunting.
No. But they weren't tracking them down. You know what I mean? They weren't crossing.
Oh, I see. Yeah. The fact that Spinosaurus basically follows them from point A to B to C.
Yeah, the whole fucking movie.
I see what you mean. Mm-hmm.
Through jungles, through fields, through water, and you're like, why? Like, the T-Rex didn't do that. The T-Rex he was moseying around in Jurassic Park and then just kind of showed up occasionally. You know?
Yeah, the cars happened to break down outside his cage.
Exactly,
his enclosure.
Yeah.
And Spielberg said this, because honestly, the first movie is really more about raptors. If you were to say it's about any species of dinosaur, that's about velociraptors. Mm-hmm. And Spielberg, I think, rightly kind of realized when he gets to the end of the movie, because that's the raptors attacking them inside the visitor center, he's like, I think the star of the movie is the T-Rex. I think fans will be upset if the T-Rex doesn't come back, because it's like, the T-Rex has that one scene, and it's awesome, and then he kind of has a cameo when he takes out a Gallimimus, and that's all we see of him until the very end. And it feels like we see more T-Rex than we actually do in that movie because the scenes are so good. But we see a lot more raptor, but like, we don't even need to see that much of the T-Rex. He can't go out like this. He can't go out a half hour into the movie, I guess, is what I'm saying.
He can't go out like a bitch.
Exactly.
You know? One bite and he was down.
Yeah, he kind of gets kind of his neck broken, I guess.
Because the T-Rex bites the Spinosaurus in the neck, and then somehow the Spinosaurus reverses it, puts him on the ground, and then snaps his neck. And you're like,
again, he's able to use that leverage because he's got, like, functioning arms. Like, again, it makes sense that the Spinosaurus wins the fight. I don't want to see him win it. I also don't think... Listen, I'm not a paleontologist. Maybe in another life I could have been, before I made some terrible, terrible decisions with my own. Paul Sereno was my hero as a child, one of the most renowned paleontologists in the world. But listen, there was a lot of debate for a period of time about the T-Rex might be a scavenger, because it was not believed that an animal that was that heavy could actually, like, move with any kind of agility. And I think that view has kind of gone away. And that was a view I never bought. And that wasn't so much... And listen, I had a scientific reason to not buy it. Again, not that I'm a paleontologist, but, like, this wasn't a I don't want my dinosaurs to have feathers thing. This wasn't, oh no, the T-Rex is cool, he can't be a scavenger. This was what his teeth are, right? You look at the T-Rex teeth. Those are teeth made to crush bone. Mm-hmm. Those are not teeth made to shred flesh. Teeth made to shred flesh are like shark teeth, right? Where they're like jagged and they've got like cuts all around them. Sharks are scavengers. I mean, they can hunt, but like the sharks, that's why they have a great sense of smell. They just, if there's blood, they'll just go to anything that's injured and take it out. That's what sharks do. That never made sense for me for if that was the T-Rex. I think the T-Rex, listen, I don't know how fast it would have been, but those teeth are designed to kill something that is living, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd agree as a fellow non-paleontologist.
Spinosaurus doesn't have the same kind of teeth quite, and it doesn't seem to have a jaw that would have been as strong. But also, from what we know of the Spinosaurus had like a big thumb claw, and it's pretty widely accepted. At least it was 20 years ago when I would have been reading about this stuff, and stuff changes all the time. But it was pretty widely accepted that Spinosaurus, despite its massive size, was kind of a fisherman. Right, he would go and stab fish with his thumb claw and just scoop it into his mouth. Like, I mean, it's tough to say because Spinosaurus is absolutely huge, but I don't think it's big game hunting. That's just my opinion. It's somewhat based in scientific fact, but listen, a lot of it is vibes. I'll be the first to admit that.
I totally agree. And I've been so quiet because I've been reading up on the Spinosaurus and the T-Rex while you've been talking. You have hit every nail on the head.
Yeah, and this is all stuff I read like 25 years ago. I just this is stuff that I still remember because I was absolutely obsessed back then.
No, yeah, you're right. You've got that dinosaur autism in you. That's good.
Okay, speaking of which, there is an embarrassing moment, an embarrassing bit of dialogue from a paleontologist in this film, in this coming up. So this is the scene where they basically expose the Kirbys as liars, as frauds, and they do it in like 3 different ways. It's very odd because after they reveal that, I kind of like how it is at first because they reveal that like they come clean, that we're not married, we were married, this is our kid, he's been missing for 8 weeks, and then I like how their first thing is, so I don't suppose that check you gave us is any good, and because they say there's no Kirby Enterprises, and they're like a bathroom remodeling store or something. Yeah, Kirby's Paint and Tile Plus.
Yeah,
in the Westgate Shopping Center in Enid, Oklahoma. And I love that their first thought is like greed again. But then they continue to expose them as frauds because even after all of this is true, and it's like, okay, these guys are frauds. They lied their way to get us on the island. Then Billy's like, hey, when you climbed K2, where did you have base camp? And I'm like, does it matter? We know they're liars at this point.
I think that's what started it. That is so
dumb.
I think that's what started it.
No, that comes after. That, I swear to God, I saw that movie yesterday morning.
I tell you, it doesn't, because he's trying to put on the backpack. And he goes, hey, when you climbed K... Again, he's like fumbling with this backpack. And he goes, hey, when you climbed K2, did you base at 25,000 feet or 30,000 feet? And he goes, it was 30,000 feet. And he goes, oh, so 1,000 feet higher than the mountain actually is? And he goes, oh, no, I think you're wrong.
And then you're
that's
wrong
when
because
like,
that happens
after...
That happens after he and Taleone, after he stumbles upon the naked Taleone, and that scene only happens after it's revealed to us, the audience, as well as to Sam Neill and to Billy, that they're not actually married. So you are wrong.
You know what? I'm gonna look this up right now. But anyways, continue.
All right.
Continue. I'm looking this up right now. I'm pulling it up.
This is a Tums Festival moment for you, Jim. I hope you know that. I guarantee it. I will bet my life savings.
I will eat my words,
I made a note of this. That was like, why do they continue to expose them as frauds? I made a note of this as I was watching it. But anyways, oh yeah. So the really dumb. In this, I'll admit, I don't remember when this came up. But Sam Neill was talking to Billy, and they're like, so what do you think that was? And he names both Baryonyx and Suchomimus, which were, I think, maybe in the same family as Spinosaurus, also giant dinosaurs that had the long snouts, and we assume kind of were fishing dinosaurs. But this guy's a paleontologist. That thing clearly had a giant spine on its fucking back. Neither of those dinosaurs did. What an idiot. Even as a kid, I'm like, what? Baryonyx doesn't look anything like that. Like, I don't know, man. That guy's Billy sucks.
Sorry, I'm half listening to you. I'm also scrolling through the movie. But keep on going on with the plot.
Yeah, listen, the plot's over. So at this point, the only people who are alive, Billy, Alan, the Kirbys, and Udesky, Michael Jeter, and this is when we learn that he's not actually a mercenary. And then they stumble upon some old InGen outpost, and they go in there, and they get attacked by raptors. Initially, the Velociraptor is hiding behind glass as if it's like preserved as if it's like pickled. But then it attacks and they run. It's kind of a fun moment where they have to like pin it in a gate, and then as they're all running away from it, it starts making its noises, and then like an idiot, Sam Neill stops and goes, "It's calling for help." Like, okay, I understand he's a paleontologist, but when your life's on the line, you don't care what that noise means. You're running. That's so silly to me. But it does come back later because William H. Macy even remembers it. And somehow, even though he just heard that noise, he knows how to recreate it with the resonator. So they're running. It's a few raptors chasing them now. They chase them through kind of a field, like a meadow. There's Parasaurolophuses and Corinthosauruses, I think is the name of it. It's something like that. And they all kind of get split up. Taya Leone and William H. Macy climb up a tree, so does Billy. Udesky, though, gets attacked, and this is a pretty cool death. The raptor steps on him and then just sinks its tail on like straight into his back. Pretty cool. Pretty gruesome.
I do like Udesky as a character, and I do feel bad for him when he dies.
Yeah, I like him. He's a fun character. He has a few kind of sarcastic lines that are kind of fun, like when they see the engine outpost, they're like, "What do you think it is?" And he's like, "I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, it's the Four Seasons." Like, okay, that's fun. Again, no one really knows where Sam Neill is, but they see Udesky moving on the ground, and so they're going to try and help him. But then the raptors jump up, and they're like inches away from being able to get Taya Leone. So the raptors set a trap. Help me make sense of this. How did this make sense? Because the way Udesky's arm moves, it doesn't look like it's actually him. Is he dead, and did they like pull a fishing line or something? Or is he actually not dead? They left him barely alive as a trap. Because I assume that's what it is, but it doesn't look like that. It looks like that the arm moves artificially. You know what I'm talking about?
Sorry, which arm? Sorry, I was...
the arm that moves, the only one. It's his right arm.
Sorry, what are we talking about? Sorry, what part?
The trap scene, when the raptors set a trap.
Yeah, I didn't actually notice any movement. I don't...
Oh, well... Yet another thing you're wrong about. Okay.
Okay. How dare you? You keep on telling this goddamn plot, pal, because I'm almost at the part.
So then Sam Neill gets surrounded by a bunch of raptors, but then some gas bombs get thrown in, and the kid, Eric, comes and saves him, and they run into like a little bunker. And they start talking. The kid, of course, knows who he is because he's also read dinosaur books, kind of like Timmy in the first one. Sam Neill's like, yeah, we're looking for you. I'm with your parents. And he's like, both of them? That's not good. They don't get along together. And then you're like, oh no, they're gonna end up getting back together through this. So, your first moment of like, oh no, that's where this movie is going, is when William H. Macy stumbles upon Taya Leone as she's changing. Because then they have a little conversation, which is actually kind of fun. But thankfully, it's not a big part of the movie.
No, you're right. And sorry, I'm jumping back in here. I'm coming hot off the presses, Patrick. So you are, my friend, in fact, incorrect. So what happens is, after the Spinosaurus and T-Rex fight, Alan punches Kirby.
Punches him, yeah.
Yeah, and he goes, what the fuck is actually going on here? Why the fuck did we land? And he goes, we're actually looking for our son. Our son went missing. He was with a friend. And he's like, what friend? And he's like, actually, because we used to be married, yada, yada, yada. You can understand this situation. And he goes, okay. And then he's like, how long have they been missing for? He's like, 8 weeks. And he goes, Jesus Christ. He goes, okay, well, I'm going to move towards the coast. You guys are not going to get off this island alive. Your son's probably already dead. Then in the next scene, we have them kind of regrouping, and the Kirbys are getting dressed and having that little... Mm-hmm.
So far, this is exactly what I've said, by the way.
No, you said no, because then...
No.
Because then he's putting on the pack.
The K2 is like the third way they expose them. They've already been exposed as liars.
But you were saying that the paint and tile thing happened before the K2 thing. And the money thing happened. The specifics of
the paint and tile wasn't important. The important part was that they were exposed as frauds prior to this. Well, then why do we need to know about K2 after that?
My friend, you said, because you brought up the check thing, and I said, no, that happened after the K2 thing, because you still think they're at least rich people, or whatever, that they were able to fund this expedition to find their missing son. But it's in this scene, after they say, okay, we're actually here to find our missing son, that they go, oh yeah, okay, I never summited K2. Also, I'm not rich. My name is Kirby, from Kirby Paint and Tile. There is no Kirby Enterprises. You're not getting paid. But if you want a bathroom remodeled, I can do it.
Okay, that was absolutely not the point of what I was saying.
Well, they did get exposed, but it wasn't. But it was exposed.
So, the point is that the exposure it continues, and it's just too much. You'd think you get it all out in one. They
yes,
drag
you're
it
right.
out.
You can get it all out in one. But listen, I was arguing about the order of events. That's what I was arguing.
Oh my god.
About. Okay.
Well, the point is K2 wasn't the first one. It
was the son. They're like, why are you here?
The son, the divorce, is like all of this stuff happens, and then it's like, oh, and then like Billy thinks he's being clever. It's like, oh, I bet you haven't even climbed K2. It's like, no shit, he's William H. Macy. This is the guy from Fargo. He's a used car salesman. Yeah. Look at him, he hasn't climbed a mountain
he's
in his
William
life.
H. Macy.
I mean, look at him. He's like a goofy looking guy.
Yeah, he is.
So Eric and Sam Neill, they're trying to meet up with their parents.
Oh, wait, hold on. Can I stop you? Because I want to talk about this Eric thing. Because I missed, obviously, the introduction of Eric to this story. I hate him.
I hate the idea of him as an individual is not... I don't think he's awful. I hate that we just have to have kids in all of these movies.
But I also hate that, like, it's a kid character written for kids. You know what I mean? Like, he's like this kid who's managed to, like, survive on his wits around dinosaurs for 8 weeks. When he does save Alan, you know, he's talking to Alan about all kinds of things, and the kid's like,
he got T-Rex pee somehow.
Yeah, and it's like, and he goes, what's this? He goes, well, that's T-Rex pee. It scares off the little ones, but attracts a really big one. And then he's like, how'd you get it?
Fin, yeah.
Oh, you don't want to know. It's like, you know, and we're supposed to be like, oh, what a funny kid. Shut the fuck up. God, I wish he'd been eaten so we didn't have to deal with him in this movie. But anyways, continue.
And I guess I missed the scene, too, where they found the parachute, and they found, not Eric, whatever the stepdad's name was, his skeleton. So they did, it was established that Billy's an adventurer. Oh my god, I forgot. And I mentioned this with the Lost World thing, but they do the 2 movies in a row, they do a lucky pack.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Why is that a thing in these Jurassic movies?
I've never heard of a lucky pack in my life.
No,
then again, I'm also not an adventurer, but...
No, yeah, because in The Lost World, it's the lucky pack. It's Julianne Moore's bag that's got holes in it, and she keeps it because... I don't even remember the story of how it was lucky, but... And then in this one, I think Sam Neill just says something like, even with what I pay you, I think you could get a better bag. And it's like, I don't think it looks that trashy. It doesn't have holes in it or anything.
No, it's like a normal looking
It looks
bag.
like a pretty normal bag. It's like, what, do you want to bring a Samsonite rolling suitcase with him? What do you expect?
Sam Neill's like, hey, bring back that fucking 3D printer and buy a nicer bag, you idiot.
You know? But he says he was out hang gliding, and he, like, a gush of wind and the bag strap caught onto something and kept him from, like, falling to his death or whatever. So that's the lucky pack. The reason I bring up that is because he takes the parasail, so he puts that in his lucky pack. Mm-hmm. And he uses it later, of course. So anyways, Sam Neill and Eric are out journeying, and then Eric hears his father's ringtone for his satellite phone, and I like how he's like, oh, that's my dad's ringtone, and then Sam Neill's like, how do you know? And it's like, who the fuck cares? It's a phone. It's clearly somebody. Yeah. Like, who cares if it's his dad or not? That's such a weird reaction. He's like, how do you know it's your dad? What if it's a stranger? Yeah. Then they go running,
I didn't even think of that. That's funny.
Yeah, I just thought of that now, I think. But I'm like, why would you care whose phone it is? It's a phone. But they go running, and there's this big perimeter fence kind of in the middle, and they're on other sides of it. And they reunite, and William H. Macy's like, how did you find us? And he's like, oh, your phone. I heard your phone. And he's like, I don't have my phone. I gave it to the pilot right before he got eaten. And then they turn back, and we hear the phone ringing from within the Spinosaurus.
Yeah, it's a great shot of just the Spinosaurus just standing there with a phone in him.
I do love, and this is, you know, the original Jurassic Park did this in the climactic scene when the T-Rex shows up, and it's like, how the hell didn't they hear him or whatever? But this too, they hear the phone somehow, but not the 6-ton creature creeping up on them.
Behind them.
Yeah, they hear the ringtone inside his stomach acid somehow. I love it. But yeah, so then the Spinosaurus goes chasing them. They find a hole in the fence, so Sam Neill and Eric get onto the other side, and they think they're safe for a moment, and then the Spinosaurus just crashes through the fence. And then they get into another building, and even though the thing just crashed through a giant fence, I guess this little door is enough to hold them in. Like, yeah, they barricaded a couple times, but, like, really?
Yeah, but still, I agree, yeah.
Billy had dropped his bag at one point, and Sam Neill picked it up. And then Billy's being really weird about needing it back. And, which isn't that weird, I don't think, but Sam Neill just, like, isn't giving it back to him for some reason. And then he opens it up and sees what's inside it, and Billy had taken raptor eggs. There's a nice little speech Sam Neill has after he says, like, listen, I know this was dumb, but I did it for the best intentions. Sam Neill's got this little, like, listen, a lot of the worst things in the world were done for the best intentions. And then he says, like, as far as I'm concerned, you're no better than the people that built this place, which is pretty harsh. Yeah. And it's not true. And he does later on, admit that he wasn't right. But it's a nice little dramatic moment.
Yeah, and Sam Neill's kind of like the only character who fully understands the gravity of anything that's happening, it seems.
Yeah, Billy thinks they're being chased by a Suchomimus. I mean, what does this guy know?
Idiot.
But yeah, anyways, they're journeying through a series of, like, catwalks, and then they realize they're in a giant bird cage. And, of course, this is the Pteranodon aviary. Jurassic Park 3, in a weird way, actually follows the plot of the Lost World novel more so than the Lost World movie does. The Lost World movie was slapped together and with no real attention to its source material, which is fine because I think the book was kind of slapped together as, like, a cash grab sequel. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this one, I think they're kind of... Because I remember Pteranodons... I don't know if there was a raptor scene, but I know they, like, stumbled upon the InGen Genetics lab, and I think there was a moment, too, where... it wasn't a kid, but there was, like, a wild man, like, living on the island who had survived for a while. I don't remember if they went there to look for him, but there just, like, was a guy that was there already before the people got there. And again, it's because of these stupid Jurassic movies, we have to make it a kid. A big old pteranodon comes and snatches Billy and is going to feed him to its young.
Snatches Eric.
Okay, you're right, but listen, this is what you get when you're in your 30s and you go by a child's name. It's going to throw people off. Yeah. You are absolutely right, it's Eric, but Billy sounds like a kid.
I agree.
I mean, there's Billy the Kid, is one of the most famous Billies who's ever lived.
And the most famous kid that's ever lived.
Kid Rock.
There you go, yeah.
So he runs from the little pteranodons. He's like jumping on these like little like cliff things, and Billy gets out his parasail and he's going to go and save him. There's a really weird line read as like Sam Neill's like chasing him, and he's like, Billy, no, and he like increasingly gets like more and more worried. But there's like one line in there that's the delivery's just off. It's like Billy, stop. It's read exactly that way, and it's like a weird ADR or something. But then it's a great yell when he actually jumps. It's like, no, Billy! Like, it's really good. But yeah, there's a weird Billy, stop in there, and it like doesn't sound like it's Sam Neill. It's very odd. I remember that as a kid. But yeah, Billy goes, and Eric is able to grab onto him, and then he kind of releases him into the water. But then a bunch of other pteranodons chase after Billy, and he gets kind of stuck on the cliff. And he's able to release himself from the parasail thing, and he falls into the water, but he continues to get pecked by a bunch of pteranodons.
Which I think I like. I think this is one of my favorite scenes, just because they look so neat. I think this is...
It's not a bad scene. The effects are incredible in this scene, too.
And they do look scary. Like, when that first pteranodon's coming through the mist, you're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Like, he looks
that is a really cool
scary
shot, yeah. I will say, this movie does this thing with all of the possible exception of the T-Rex and the raptors. All the dinosaurs' faces are weird. And I know Pteranodon's not a dinosaur. I'm not doing this. I'm not getting in this argument. But they look haggard. They look like they have, like, wrinkles around their eyes. They have, like, you notice the Brachiosaurus has, like, the red around its eyes and stuff. And it's like, they all kind of look like the Spinosaurus. Yeah, it's kind of weird. They slightly adjust the look to all of these animals, which is fair. But they end up just kind of looking ugly, which is whatever.
Ugly and tired.
Pteranodon is on the catwalk before the catwalk collapses. It's chasing after them, and then the catwalk like falls on top of it and kind of pins it in the water. And then everyone's able to swim out, and the Pteranodon cannot get out. So now we're down to 4 people: the 3 Kirbys and Sam Neill. They find a boat. They're in the river. They're going to get to the coast. They mourn the death of Billy
for 2 seconds.
Well, again, seconds after that, the Brachiosaurus comes up to them and looks at them, and we get the classic Jurassic Park music playing. Which, by the way, John Williams didn't do the score for this movie. Obviously, they reuse a lot of the Jurassic Park stuff, so you could easily miss the fact that he's not there. But they're in the boat. They've got a satellite phone. They've got a little bit of charge. They'll be able to make maybe one call. So who are you going to call? He calls Dan Aykroyd. No, he calls Ellie Sattler. Ellie's kid picks up the phone. And the kid's watching Barney. And I'm like, oh no, they're going for like an ironic thing. It's like, oh, there's a happy dinosaur on there. And then while all this is happening too, then the Spinosaurus attacks. This is a pretty neat scene. Great combination of CG and animatronics. CG looks best at night when it's rainy.
Yeah.
It just does. Like, that's why the T-Rex looked so awesome in that first one.
They're all in the boat, and to save themselves, they decide to, like, lock themselves into this cage.
Yeah, there's, like, a cage on the boat, yeah.
And then you're like, but,
Is that a good idea or a bad idea? I don't know.
First off, terrible idea. What happens if the boat sinks, which it does? But secondly,
well, sure.
Like, an hour before that, you watched it bust through these giant, like, this giant steel fence.
Yes, but then 10 seconds after that, they held it up with, like, a garage door.
That's true.
So it's it's inconsistently strong in their defense.
Yeah.
The boat is sinking. Sam Neill's able to get out. He had the kid, and he said the kid is like, go get your mommy. And then the mom, Laura Dern's on the phone. He gets a few words out, and he says, like, Site B, the river.
Yeah, which, great, thanks. I'm on a fucking island, and how many rivers are there?
Well, yeah, we don't know. But it was set up earlier that her husband works in the State Department very conveniently. Otherwise, I think this would be a wasted phone call if not. But Sam Neill gets out of there and he finds like a flare gun. Leone's stuck in the cage underwater. William H. Macy climbs onto this like crane to try and distract the Spinosaurus. And meanwhile, oil is leaking, obviously, from the boat. Leone gets scratched, but she's able to escape when the Spinosaurus draws its attention to William H. Macy, and then Sam Neill fires the flare gun, and it's there's a bunch of fire in the water, and the Spinosaurus kind of gets his thigh set on fire, and then he kind of runs off. And they're kind of mourning the death of William H. Macy for a few moments because he fell into the fire water, but he's okay. Also, I skipped the kind of the fun scene of how they get the phone, because we already knew the phone was in the Spinosaurus. They find it in a giant pile of shit, and there's kind of a fun moment where they're digging through it, and then a big-ass, I think it's a Carnotaurus, comes up to them and is like staring them down, and is like, oh my god, it's going to eat them, but then it just runs off because they smell like shit, and it doesn't want to eat that. And it's like, okay, that's fun. So they're still making their way to the coast, on foot this time, and the raptors are back. And they know they've got the eggs. It's like, okay, we're going to give you back the eggs. For some reason, they think Tay Leone has the eggs. I think they're sexist, these raptors. But because what you said earlier, they kind of kneel down and they're like, okay, no sudden movements. William H. Macy's like, oh, get behind me, and then the raptor snarls at him and he has to back off. So Sam Neill's reaching for the eggs, and they're going to give the eggs back. And he sees in the lucky pack, there's that 3D printed resonator. So he takes that out and he breathes in it, and the raptors all react to it. And it's like, oh, there's a raptor noise somewhere. And then William H. Macy's like, no, call for help. Because remember, they specifically heard the raptor calling for help earlier. Yeah. And then so he somehow knows how to recreate that noise. And then the raptors run off, like thinking there's another raptor. But then they also run off because they hear helicopters. This is the climax of the scene. It's not even an action scene. It's the climax of the movie, excuse me. Not even an action scene. It's incredibly disappointing.
Yeah.
It's lame.
Very lame, yeah.
We needed the T-Rex back in some capacity. Maybe not even for the climax. We just need the raptors. Like, the most exciting scene, the Pteranodon scene is pretty exciting. Then the Spinosaurus River scene is even more exciting.
Yeah.
And then this is just lame.
This is like crappy dinosaur porn, Like, it's like you don't really get what you want out of this dinosaur movie in terms of dinosaurs, but you do get dinosaurs. You know what I mean?
I do. So they run out to the beach, and there's a guy standing with a megaphone calling for them. And then they're like shouting out, like, don't do that, it's a bad idea, because that's what attracted the Spinosaurus initially. But then a bunch of Marines come out in their amphibious landing craft, and there's helicopters, and so they are saved. And as they're getting aboard their helicopter, I guess they found Billy first, because Billy's there. He's barely alive.
Yeah, and this isn't even like a touching reunion. Like, he walks up and Sam Neill's like, oh, Billy. And he goes,
I got your head. what?
Yeah, and he's like, thanks. And instead of saying like, hey man, I'm sorry about what I said earlier, I'm glad you're alive, he holds his hat and he goes, well, that's the important thing. Anyways, I'm going to go sit down
pumped up on painkillers at this point, probably, right? I mean, you're not going to have a good heart-to-heart with Billy at this point, probably.
No.
And then as the helicopter is going off, this film commits perhaps the greatest sin, perhaps even greater than killing the T-Rex, and that is that it almost recreates the final line of The Searchers. Final line of The Searchers, let's go home, Debbie. Final line of this movie, William H. Macy says to Téa Leoni, let's go home. So that is Jurassic Park 3. So, Jim, Jurassic Park 3, what are your thoughts?
It's definitely shittier than I remembered. The story's just really bad. It's just a bad story. One of the good things I can say about this movie is that the pacing is good because it's just go, 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 go pretty much the whole time.
I actually think that's a problem because there's like so little build-up. It's like the second they land, there's a Spinosaurus, and then there's so little... I guess the scenes where there aren't a dinosaur attack are so clearly like these are conversation scenes. And they're not necessarily poorly done, but they're just kind of... the writing isn't great.
Well, and you don't really like any of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, William H. Macy... I'm tempted to say this just isn't the right part for him, but it kind of is because he's like a fraud from the beginning, and he's not an adventurer, but he's just a little too goofy. Even some of it's the lines, some of it's his delivery, I'm sure. But like when they see that InGen complex, it's like, I bet Eric's in there. I'd bet my bottom dollar. And it's like, who talks like that? Was he from the 40s? That's a line. That's a line from the Annie musical, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what the hell is this? Who talks like that?
If I had a kid and he'd been missing on a dinosaur-infested island for 8 weeks, again, I would be... And if I showed up hoping that my kid was alive, I'd look at a disgusting, crumbling building, and I wouldn't say, oh, I bet my kid's in there. I'd say, oh, I bet my kid has been turned into dinosaur poop 7.5 weeks ago.
So you're giving him a half a week on the island. Interesting.
Maybe not even that. I don't know. My kid, I'm sure, would be terrible. You are right in the sense that everything does kind of happen too quickly, but I'm just glad that the movie kind of finishes faster.
And it's a short movie, as we said. I mean, short for a movie like this.
And there are relatively exciting things to see on screen.
There are.
What you do want to see out of a Jurassic Park movie is dinosaurs, and you see dinosaurs.
We do.
It's not really how you want to see them. We've already spoken in length about the T-Rex versus Spinosaurus thing, and how a T-Rex would just make this movie better.
We just as an audience, and this is a nostalgia thing, but we as an audience have a connection with the T-Rex. No one on Earth has ever gone to a museum because there's a Spinosaurus skeleton. If there's a Spinosaurus skeleton at the museum, it's like, oh, hey, that's cool. But listen, when I was a kid, I have seen... Now, I just learned recently, because I was at the American Museum of Natural History. They have a T-Rex there, and they said something like only like 15 T-Rexes have been found, like in any percentage. You know, we're not even talking like a pretty full skeleton. It's just like we found traces of like 15 T-Rexes. So pretty rare, you know, in the grand scheme of things.
Isn't the most complete T-Rex fossil... Well, wasn't that one found in like Alberta or something?
I think it's one of the Dakotas, but you're talking about Sioux.
Yeah, that's who I was thinking.
It's got a name. I have seen the two most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex skeletons, because the most complete is Sioux, which is at the Field Museum in Chicago. There was that was a huge news story when I was a kid, at least it was to me anyways. There was like a bidding war, like a bunch of museums were going after it. The Field Museum outbid everyone, and I've seen Sioux so many times. I had a T-shirt that said Sue on it, and we used to wear it at a family reunion. Who's that boy named Sue over there? But yeah. And then the second most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton is at the Oxford Museum of Natural History. So just throwing that out there. But here's the thing, just dinosaurs speaking. I judge museums based on the quality of their dinosaur exhibits, okay? There's two fantastic science museums in Chicago. There's the Museum of Science and Industry. There's the Field Museum. Science and Industry doesn't have dinosaurs. Field Museum's automatically better. Museum of Natural History, there's a lot of cool stuff in there. Dinosaurs easily the best part. Like, they just are. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. Museums are aware that dinosaurs are the coolest things in the world.
I agree, and I will say one of the coolest dino fossils I've seen in my life is at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. It's of a Triceratops, and it's fucking awesome.
The Museum of Natural History, they've got a T-Rex, they've got a Triceratops, they've got a pretty awesome Styracosaurus. Their claim to fame is kind of the Allosaurus. They've got their Allosaurus is kind of in the main lobby. They've also got the Allosaurus upstairs. It's a good-looking Allosaurus. Oxford was a fantastic. You go to the Oxford Museum of Natural History. The entire first floor is just dinosaurs. It's just like you walk into it and it's just this giant square of dinosaurs, and it's like this is. I went to that museum. I don't think I left the dinosaur area, and I was probably there for like 4 hours.
That's pretty cool, man. But
awesome. Here's the thing. Dinosaurs, listen, this is why, talk about the Louvre all you want. There's no dinosaurs there. I don't give a shit. Museums are only as good as their dinosaur exhibits.
You know what? Fair point.
What is the signature attraction of any dinosaur exhibit? It's going to be the T-Rex.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a fact. If you have a T-Rex, again, there aren't that many out there. I think the Museum of the Rockies has one, which is the museum that they're working for in this movie, which I think is in Montana somewhere. There aren't that many T-Rexes out there, but if you have a T-Rex, that is your claim to fame. And I know there are bigger dinosaurs. I know there are bigger predators. There's just nothing cooler, and it is a shame to see the Spinosaurus defeated. And listen, and I guess it's just stupid too, because it's like the last movie, so much of that movie was there's more than one T-Rex, and that was almost like the gimmick of that movie. Like, we only had one T-Rex before, now we've got two.
Now we've got it.
And they rip Toby from the West Wing in half, but we have one T-Rex die early on, and you just assume another one's going to show up.
Yeah, and it never does.
It's like amazing that happens. But again, this is all superficial stuff, to be fair. Like, it is nostalgia. There's nothing wrong with the Spinosaurus. I do dislike how Spinosaurus dominant this movie is. Mm-hmm. I think a movie like the original Jurassic Park can be Velociraptor dominant, because the Velociraptor gives you a lot more freedom of location.
Yes,
that they can get inside a building. Like, you probably couldn't do an entire movie. I mean, you could. It just wouldn't be that good of like an entire movie of just a T-Rex. With how the raptors are presented in these movies, you could do an entire movie of raptors, just like hunting you inside like a mall or a hotel or anything. So I think if we are going to have a Jurassic World be dominated by one species, I would like to see it be Velociraptor. But listen, if you're going to have raptors, you need to have. And if raptors are going to be your climax, you need to have an exciting fucking scene. And that's like, it's interesting because The Lost World has 2 climaxes, and this movie doesn't have any. Well, it's just weird. It's a weird series.
You know what would have been even like a better climax than this is if they go to hand the eggs back to the Velociraptors, and instead of the noise of a helicopter, you hear a T-Rex roar in the distance.
Yeah. Again, and again, they ran out of money. I don't know if they were going to have more raptor stuff, or if they were going to have the Spinosaurus show up again. Because the Spinosaurus, even though it doesn't die, does kind of go out like a bitch. Like, it gets a first-degree burn, and it's out.
Yeah, this Jurassic Park movie is the one that feels the most cash-grabby out of the original 3.
Yeah.
You know, they were just like, okay, let's make a third movie. Let's make this into a trilogy. What do people like? Dinosaurs. What do people want to see? Dinosaur fights. What else do people like? Velociraptors. Okay, cool. Anything else? No, not really. Let's just throw a half-assed story together of some parents, some divorced parents losing their kid and tricking Sam Neill onto a different island. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, cool. What else do people like? Flying dinosaurs. That's cool. Do you want to make them scary? Yeah, let's make them kind of scary. Mm-hmm. Anything else? We have to put the obligatory Jurassic Park music and like swelling music and lovely dinosaur scenes, you know?
And we have to have the scene of wonderment. I guess we'll just fit it in an hour into the movie because we didn't have it earlier, and it's completely out of place at this point because we've seen so many people die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, now you say this feels the most cash grabby, and I agree. Again, in comparison to The Lost World, which is not a great film, but it's better than this, I think. The Lost World is, and we did a good job of discussing this. The Lost World is Spielberg going through the motions, and it's still a far better made movie than this. There are several scenes, like we talked about, like the Spinosaurus River scene's pretty good, the Pteranodon scene's pretty good. There are several scenes in The Lost World that are really, really well done. And yes, the overall movie isn't that compelling, but the raptors in the field, I'm not talking gymnastic raptors. I'm talking the first time the raptors. And the fact that you don't see the raptors until like an hour and a half into the movie. It's like terrifying when they show up.
Yeah.
And the scene where they're hunting the herbivores, the scene when the Triceratops gets loose and
just
tears
starts
apart
wrecking
the camp.
shop.
That's like... Even some of the stuff with the T-Rex, I don't love all the stuff with the trailer hanging over the edge of the cliff, but some of the T-Rex stuff is good in that movie too. And yeah, the San Diego stuff is like they're throwing in the towel at that point. They gave up. But The point is,
Yeah.
there's a lot of sequences in The Lost World that are very, very good. This movie has one or two standout sequences. I really think it's the Spinosaurus river scene more than the Pteranodon scene's fine. I think the river scene's the standout for me.
I agree with you. Yeah,
So-
this is just a crappy movie.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I can't remember the way you said something, and I can't remember quite how you said it, but I wanted to kind of come back to something you were saying when you were complaining about the Jurassic World movies. Mm-hmm. So something that I used to do when I was younger, whether this actually made it onto a page or not, whether I wrote anything or not, I used to kind of imagine, like, how would I make a sequel to a movie I really liked, right? I wrote my own, or I started writing my own version of, like, a Godzilla reboot. And some of it actually was featured in the 2014 Godzilla. I was so proud that Godzilla's first American attack was in Honolulu, because that was my idea when I was 17 or 18 years old. I'm like, why wouldn't it be? It's the closest American place to Japan. I've imagined, like, okay, what would I do with the Universal monsters to kind of reboot them? And I've talked to you about my Mummy idea, which I still think is great. It's the Mummy, basically the descent with 1920s archaeologists who get trapped inside a pyramid or some kind of tomb and are just being hunted by mummies.
Yeah,
That's the entire movie.
Great.
Very simple. Now, I've thought of, like, okay, Jurassic Park, for a long time, my favorite movie. How would I make a sequel to that? I've never been able to come up with a good idea. Because there's no point. And I'm not just saying, oh, the original Jurassic Park's so good, because it is, but, okay, Site B, there's another island with dinosaurs, there's no fences. Like, okay, that's something. It's pretty unimaginative. It's either that, or you have Jurassic World, which is they're opening the park again. Mm-hmm. There's, like, nothing else you can do.
No, and again, I think Jurassic World did it the correct way, where you open a park, and it seems to be running smoothly, and then things go drastically wrong.
I think the only thing you could do that would be different, and I don't think it would be good, and it's actually something that the latest Jurassic World kind of did. The second one ends with a kid, again, they're always shoving these kids in these movies, a kid releasing all the dinosaurs to the world, which is possibly the dumbest ending in motion picture history, right up there with Halloween 4. And then I remember leaving the theater thinking that movie was dumb, but kind of enjoyable, but I'm like, how the hell do you make a sequel to that? And then it struck me, Planet of the Apes, but with dinosaurs. Okay? Make the raptors the dominant species. What else can you do? And yes, that's schlock and it's dumb, but what else can you do? And it's like the newest Jurassic World, they did like a little bit of like dinosaurs are kind of how the world exists if dinosaurs were kind of just let loose on the world. It wasn't as interesting probably as it could have been, but like that's like the only thing you can do with the Jurassic sequel that would be different or interesting really in any way.
And again, I haven't seen the other two Jurassic World movies, but I was going to say the only other thing you could do is like take that capitalistic approach to the Jurassic World theme park, but do other things with it, like make pet dinosaurs for people and have like...
I'm going to stop you, Jim, because you're talking about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes right there.
Oh, am I?
Like the fourth Planet of the Apes movie, all dogs and cats have been wiped out, so they have apes as pets, but the apes are basically slaves, so there's a slave revolt. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes is amazing. It is so good. It's so like weird and silly, but it's kind of amazing. It's just the entire movie is just a slave rebellion. It's kind of incredible. As dumb as it is, I think the only real thing to do is go Planet of the Apes on this thing. And listen, it would be dumb and it would be terrible, but they're already dumb and terrible at this point. Might as well do something a little different.
But you don't even need to go like full Planet of the Apes where you have like a new dominant species.
No,
in the sense that they're really intelligent.
You don't need them to say Alan.
Yeah. Yeah, but you just have them take over everything and society crumbles because there's T-Rexes running amok in streets and eating police officers and things like that, and people are hiding. It's like a zombie apocalypse, but with dinosaurs.
You'd have like an underground cult that like worships the dinosaurs or something.
Yeah, then you have people who have like figured out how to ride dinosaurs, maybe the same cult,
Again, like a Chris Pratt type stuff. You're talking about stuff that you hated, and
no, but
I could see that being reworked in something that would be mildly interesting. I don't think it really worked in that movie.
Maybe I didn't like it because of Chris Pratt, and I'm not saying I'm hating on Chris Pratt or anything.
Everyone does, it's fine.
But when he puts his hand up and he's like blue,
the fact that that's his only move. He does that all the time as the hand, yeah.
This is so stupid. And again, and I don't need, like, it's different to maybe, like, feed dinosaurs pieces of meat and have a harness on them than talking to a dinosaur like it's your fucking trained dog. Or, like, how, you know, if people rode dinosaurs, they could, like, attach carts to dinosaurs and dangle meat or heads of lettuce or something in front of the dinosaurs and make them go, but not just talk to them like you fucking raised these things from birth. Like, you know, he was talking to the dinosaurs like they were the dogs in, what, John Wick 3 or whatever?
I guess my recollection of this film is slightly different because I feel like the movie at least at the start showed that he wasn't fully in control. Like, he could kind of control them, like, basically just long enough to not kill them. But then he does end up kind of riding a motorcycle with them later, so maybe they kind of...
Yeah, and then I'm like, ugh.
Listen, I'm not here to defend Jurassic World movies. I'm not, so I don't want to get in an argument with this because I think you and I see this somewhat eye to eye. Yeah. And it sounds like we see Jurassic Park 3 eye to eye finally. It's not good.
No.
I don't think it's like the worst movie ever, but I do hate it.
I mean, as a kid,
I do kind of hate it. Yeah. It's just like... There's a few things I like, and I actually, like I said, I'm going to stick by this, at least in the first half, or the first act. I like what they do with the Sam Neill, with Alan Grant. I think he's actually a more fun and interesting character in this movie than he was in the first one. But all the other characters suck, and, you know, it's like, it doesn't make up for everything. Billy is the worst. You hate Eric. I didn't think Eric was that bad. Again, for like a teen survivalist in the, you know, I could imagine that character being a lot worse. I could imagine that character being a lot worse. Okay, I could see him being like Gizmo in Gremlins 2, and he takes up like a Rambo bandana or something. Okay, like, I could see it being worse.
So then let's get into this then, because what are your opening thoughts on Gremlins 2, the new batch? Because this is a movie I've seen maybe once before, maybe twice before.
Mm-hmm. Me too, yeah.
It was back when I was a kid, or at least younger than I am now.
I hated it when I was a kid.
And yeah, I was never like a fan of it, but I don't remember being this upset with it.
Okay, so you hated this movie then?
I don't know if hate. I think hate's a really strong word. It upset you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just annoyed watching it.
Gremlins 2 is an interesting movie. I don't know what I think of it overall. I think what disappointed me about it as a kid, and this is still something I don't enjoy about it, but like Gremlins was a special film for me as a kid because yes, even as a kid I knew it was a comedy, but it was like the one horror movie that I could watch at that age, and it is tense, and there's a couple scenes, the kitchen scene with the microwave, and that scene is kind of funny when you see the gremlin just biting the heads off the gingerbread cookies, but like that
they're all
seems
sitting
pretty tense.
In the theater. You know, I mean, it's not tense, but it's funny.
There's a lot of scenes that aren't tense; they are just funny. That's all of Gremlins 2, with the exception of there's a pretty good jump scare when the thing comes out of the TV screen. But and that one got me as a kid, I know. But like for the most part, this Gremlins felt like it was like a more like as adult as I could go as a kid, in the sense that like I'm thinking specifically the scene with the teacher when the teacher's trying to feed the gremlin like a Milky Way or a Snickers or something, and it grabs its hand, like, and you don't see it, and it's like a really well directed scene. It's really well lit. There's that like projector. It's really creepy. That scene is so good. There is nothing like that in Gremlins 2. This is a completely different movie.
It is, and it's got to be solely because of the fact that Joe Dante didn't want to make this movie, right? I mean, from what I understand, he wasn't interested in making a sequel, and the studio kept pressing him, and he said, I'll only make it if I have total, complete creative control over
And he made
everything.
a Warner Brothers cartoon. I mean, this film is, stylistically, it's an homage to Looney Tunes, which is very weird that's happening in what's at least nominally a horror movie.
Yeah, but nothing is played for horror in this movie, whereas the first Gremlins, there was that horror aspect, like you've already brought up. But this is just a director who is annoyed with the fact that he has to make a sequel, I think, and he is poking fun at Gremlins. Mm-hmm. The Gremlin world building, the rules that exist in this Gremlins universe, and just the fact that he's making a sequel.
Well, and I just, when you mentioned that too, I looked up and I was curious what Joe Dante had done after Gremlins, between Gremlins and Gremlins 2. Because Joe Dante we think of primarily as a horror director, right? Mm-hmm. The Howling, the Twilight Zone movie. there's always been a little bit of humor to it, right, with Piranha, etc. The movies he made in between Gremlins and Gremlins 2, with the exception of, I don't know what Explorers is. I've never heard of it. The three other movies he made in between them, or 2.5 movies, he only did a few scenes for Amazon Women on the Moon, are goofy comedies. Inner Space is a science fiction comedy that is very funny. It's a Martin Short, Dennis Quaid movie. Amazon Women on the Moon is like a weird anthology comedy. I don't really know how to describe it. Like Animal House would be the closest thing. It's not as good as Animal House, but it's like that kind of attitude and silliness. And then The Burbs, which is more of a Gremlins tone. It's a dark comedy. But Gremlins 2, the new batch, tonally is more Inner Space than it is any of the other. More Inner Space or Amazon Women. It's Amazon Women on the Moon for kids. Amazon Women on the Moon is kind of a raunchy adult comedy, but this is, it's very odd.
This is almost a movie that's solely meant for children. As an adult, I don't really find any actual joy in watching this. I think some of the gags are funny, and I think some of the things that they do are funny. But imagine being a parent going to theaters with your kid to see this, thinking like, oh, Gremlins.
I will disagree on the sense, and this is just Joe Dante as a personality, as a filmmaking personality. But I agree. I didn't really find it too funny or anything. But I think with Joe Dante, there's such like a language of film and such a love of older movies, whether it's gothic horror like Universal Monsters type, or like Christopher Lee's in this movie, obviously, but like, or even just the Warner Brothers cartoons, that what an adult could get out of it is references to other stuff. And these aren't just references, these are references within jokes. But I think an adult could get something out of it. I didn't, for the most part.
Now, speaking of references, did you even see the reference for the Quatermass experiment?
I don't recall.
There's a sign on a door, there's like Dr. Quatermass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Which there's like lots of door signs that are referencing things in other movies, and
yeah, I figured. This is like a Simpsons episode. It's like there's background gags. Like I haven't caught all the stuff that's in there, but
this
the point is
a gag a minute movie.
But the point is that like I don't find it that amusing. Like it's amusing in The Simpsons. It's amusing in a different setting. It's amusing in Police Squad, The Naked Gun, that kind of stuff. This just, I don't know. It's, for me anyways, it's not the right movie for it.
No, I agree. And even, I'm not sure.
And then there's some stuff that's like like the Hulk Hogan stuff is off the rails. Like,
we'll get to that.
That's its own thing.
I don't know if this was at the beginning of the version you watched, but when I because I rented both movies for this episode on YouTube.
I did as well, so I think we saw the same.
Okay, so did it open with the Looney Tunes sketch?
Yeah, I did not remember that. Very
interesting. I didn't remember that either, and I thought, oh, that's really weird. I mean, like, I like Looney Tunes, I like Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, and, I think they're funny. But I was like, oh, tonally, this is setting a totally different tone right off the bat.
This is also a movie, too, for one reason or another, that draws attention to it being a Warner Brothers property. They have the Batman logo up here.
Yeah, I did like that. That made me chuckle. To just briefly summarize this, I guess, really the plot of the movie is that Billy finds Gizmo. Gizmo gets wet again, births a bunch of gremlins who...
Well, they're Mogwais first, and then they're Mogwais until...
They become gremlins, and then they take over this quote-unquote smart office building, which I'll touch on later, run by a Donald Trump-esque character named Daniel Clamp.
It's superficially Donald Trump. The personality is completely different. Like, he's actually, in a weird way, kind of a likable character.
He is, and he turns out to be a good guy. And,
he's a very jovial personality, actually.
And really also only Donald Trump, because also in the 90s, in like the mid-80s, late 80s, 90s, New York, Donald Trump was a big name. I mean, he's still kind of... He's still kind of
a big name. Yeah. I think most people have heard of him, Jim.
I didn't even realize what I was saying. Oh my god. And then what's the name? What's his tower? Is it Clamp Tower?
Yeah, that's all.
So there you go, Trump Tower, whatever.
Well, and just the way his name is all over everything. That's a very Trump thing. I remember this was long before he was a true political figure. I remember walking through the streets of New York with my parents, and there was Trump Tower, and we're looking at like this, not a map, but just something that's like this is a list of the things in it, and then it's like the Trump Auditorium at Trump Tower, and it's just like his name's so important to him. He puts it on everything.
Anyways, these gremlins take over this smart building, which is full of different places, like offices,
There's
lab
TV
with
studios.
animals. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
the lab is how it all starts because he's bulldozing. Well, the old Chinese man dies, which is kind of like a sad way to start.
Yeah, what's his name? Wing.
I don't remember, but yeah, he dies, and he was the only one standing in the way of Clamp's Chinatown building project, and so they were like tearing that building down. And again, this is all interesting because it's setting up Clamp as this asshole industrialist, and then he actually ends up having feelings later. But it's just like someone who works for him just kind of spots Gizmo as he's escaping. Then they bring him into their lab where they do animal testing and cloning, and it's all run by Christopher Lee. Yeah. Yeah, and then Billy finds out that he's there, and he kidnaps him.
And he tries to bring him back. And then
he tries to bring him back.
Zaniness ensues. But this is much like the first movie where gremlins take over, and then at the end of the movie, they are defeated.
Chaos, yeah.
Everything in between this very thin plot is just like gags. Mm-hmm. There's like it's this very thin plot that's holding it all together.
The microwave cooking show.
Yeah, and I will say actually one gag that made me laugh, other than the Batman bat symbol, was when Clamp is talking about his Chinatown project, and he's like showing the screen to Wing before he dies. He's like, yeah, he goes, we need to demolish your building, and then he has the plans for Chinatown on the screen, and he's like, this will make Chinatown oriented.
Oh yeah, that's
right. Just like, that's fucking stupid. Oh, Robert Picardo's in this movie, who is famously the Doctor on Star Trek Voyager, which I don't really think he's done anything else that big.
I think the character Billy is really strong in the original Gremlins. I like that he's back and he's with
Kate.
I like that they're still out there hanging out, and they're in the big city. They've made it, except they're trying to make it really work, made it. You know? Yeah, she's like a tour guide, and he's like a
master draftsman
artist
or whatever.
Who you guarantee his name has never been on anything that he's produced, and there's like a little bit of that. There's still some heart to these characters, a little bit. Dick Miller, of course, is arguably the best part of this film, even though he died in the first one. They just like you certainly when his house gets bulldozed by gremlins, you assume he's dead, but
you're like, Futtermans are dead.
I'm fairly certain Dick Miller has been in like every Joe Dante movie. I mean, Joe Dante's probably still making movies, and Dick Miller's dead, but he's in Piranha, he's in The Howling, he's in Explorers, which is the movie I've never heard of. He's in The Burbs. Yeah, like Joe Dante and him, they were clearly just close, and Dante got the start through Roger Corman. Dick Miller is as connected to Roger Corman as anyone was, so yeah. But he's just a joy to watch in just about everything, but he's fun here.
Yeah, I mean, he's the most fun character,
I think,
in the movie. Again, it's a shame that kind of the main characters aren't even like the Gremlins are the main characters. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah, they kind of are.
But there's nothing to them, which is the problem, which really kind of drags this movie in.
There is, but there isn't, because... So, we mentioned this movie is nothing but gremlin wackiness. The original Gremlins has a bunch of different set pieces where gremlins do wacky things, right? They launch the old lady, the Wicked Witch, the West, through the chair, and they do wacky stuff, but the famous scene of Gremlins is in the bar that Phoebe Cates is a bartender at. And that is that is pure gremlin mayhem. Everything about it. There's a lot of gags in there. They're playing pool. They're smoking. There's one's doing like sock puppets, I think. This movie is entirely that.
It's exhausting.
What's interesting about it, but also like again, yeah, you and I aren't necessarily fans of this, is that for the most part the Gremlins all looked the same in Gremlins. Like there's a little variation. Some of them would have outfits, like there's the one in like the flash dance scene that's got like a leotard on or something, and you know, and then the one of them, there's like a Humphrey Bogart looking one. I think he's got like a fedora and a trench coat. In this movie, they're all like, each gremlin has its own gimmick, and with how many gremlins there are, it's kind of amazing. But it's also, again, yeah, that this is like the entire movie. It's tiring, like, because there's the goofy-eyed gremlin.
Oh my god!
Which there's have you seen the Key and Peele sketch on that?
No, I haven't.
There's a great Key and Peele sketch about pitching Gremlins 2. Jordan Peele is playing this like really effeminate gay guy, and he's just pitching the wackiest idea for Gremlins 2. And he's like, and you know what? We're going to have a googly-eyed gremlin. We're going to have all this stuff. And then the sketch just ends with, this was all in the movie. And it's like, it's funny because like if you hadn't seen Gremlins 2, these are the fucking weirdest ideas in the world. Yes, there's the googly-eyed gremlin. There's the bat gremlin. There's the intelligent gremlin.
Yeah, spider gremlin.
Spider gremlin.
Electric gremlin.
Trans gremlin, or gremlin in drag, whatever that gremlin is. It's kind of amazing, and it's a true testament to the effects of Rick Baker, who was not involved in the first film, that he's doing all this stuff. It's genuinely amazing to see all the puppetry animatronics on display. It's like one of the most impressive special effects movies I think I've seen, but it's just in service of a movie I don't enjoy.
No, it's in service of a movie that is nothing but gags, and that's not an enjoyable movie.
It's a cartoon.
Yeah.
It is a live-action cartoon, and you know me, Jim. I stopped watching cartoons when I was 6 years old, 7 years old. I don't know. Yeah. I remember my dad told me one day, "You're too old for cartoons," and I never watched them after that.
Man,
it was like SpongeBob was like brand new.
So I have your dad to blame for you missing out on years of hilarious SpongeBob activities and not watching anime.
Well, the anime thing is there's other reasons too.
You don't want to be a pervert. I understand.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, you do for SpongeBob specifically, because I think SpongeBob was a show that I had just kind of started to get into, and then my dad's like, no.
Which, by the way, peak comedy, SpongeBob. Genuinely.
Oh, come on.
No, it's hilarious.
Frasier. Alan Partridge.
Frasier's great. Seinfeld's great, but there's a lot of great absurdist humor in SpongeBob.
First three seasons of Arrested Development.
Those are pretty good.
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah, Curb's great, but SpongeBob is full of great absurdist humor that is just flat out hilarious. So, like we said, Billy and Kate, they're living in New York. They work in Clamp's offices, Clamp Tower. Again, it's this smart building, and it's like everything's automated, but nothing works.
Nothing works. Like the revolving doors are awful.
Yeah, like it spins a guy out. But also too, I like in that scene Billy and Kate are going up the stairs, and you could see like a bunch of flowers planted next to the staircase, but they're not flowers; they're like metallic flowers. Like it's just like hunks of metal that are made to look like flowers. I don't think I noticed that. When Clamp is looking at Billy's drawing of the Chinatown Clamp Tower or whatever, Billy's got a flower, and Picard, what's his name, Robert Picardo.
Oh yeah, they're not allowed to have plants. They're not allowed to have house plants in the office.
Yeah, and they're not allowed to have art. And then he points at like some disgusting modern minimalist art.
Oh yeah, the art has to be approved by the company or something like that.
Yeah, and he's like, "We have provided beautiful art to look at." But later when Clamp comes to look at Billy's drawing, he's like, "Oh, this is so nice. It's so warm. Wow, flowers are great. Kids are great. That gives off a warm feel. But get rid of the elm trees. That makes people think of the Dutch and disease." But in Clamp Tower, the average person is living a less than stellar life. Or I should say a less than stellar work life.
Oh yeah, they like fire a guy remotely from like a security camera when they see him smoking a cigarette on an unauthorized break.
Yeah, and then
there's Grandpa Lewis
Fred.
Or whatever. Grandpa Fred?
Yeah, the Dracula guy?
Yeah, what's his name in the Munsters?
Oh, I don't remember.
It's Uncle or Grandpa or something. But yeah, he's Grandpa Fred in the movie. He's your Svengoolie, Joe Bob, a horror host, but he has dreams of being an actual journalist, and he's like, this sucks, this is not what I want to do.
Yeah, and he's like 65, and he's dressed as Dracula. He is dressed as Dracula the whole movie.
But I also like that because Billy's friends with him, and Billy goes up like, "Hey, sorry about the change of your time slot." And he says that he's on at 3:30 in the morning. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, and what did he say? He's like,
the only people who watch TV at 3:30 in the morning aren't afraid of werewolves. Said something about like they're drunk or I don't remember.
He says something about people being stoned or something. But there's all kinds of weird things. Like there's a food court in this building. There's, television stations are broadcasting out of this building. And there's like a genetics lab.
They're also re-editing and colorizing movies, which was a Ted Turner thing at the time.
Yes.
But there's that constant voice, that like the Clamp Tower voice that comes on. My favorite line in the movie was something like, "Watch Casablanca in color and with a happy ending," or something like that. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, what was the line, too, about when the lights were... Like, when the Gremlins started taking over the building, the lights were flickering, and the building's voice
Fire, the building is on fire. And then it's like, the glorious discovery of man, and like it goes on this like the way you would talk about fire in like a documentary about the discovery of it or something.
Yeah, but then when the lights are flickering, he's like, "The lights are not the illumination system is not working correctly. Please just do not notice it." or something.
That voice guy is some of the best laughs of the movie.
Oh, easily. But then also Christopher Lee. So at this genetics lab, like we mentioned earlier, Christopher Lee.
I enjoyed how straight Christopher Lee is playing it, even though his name is Dr. Catheter. Yeah. And like he's so clearly like a comedy character, but he plays it very straight, which is great.
Yeah, and when we're introduced to him, he gets a package delivered, and he goes, "Oh, I hope it's malaria. No, it's just rabies. I'm supposed to get the flu next week."
Well, and then I like how he takes the Kleenex from his... I like how everyone who works up there is like always sick. That's kind of fun.
Yeah. But they're the ones who have Gizmo. They're showing Christopher Lee, they're like, hey, look at this thing we found. It's kind of like a hamster or like a gerbil, I don't know. And then they start playing old like rock and roll music for Gizmo, and he starts dancing.
Oh, it's Fats Domino, yeah.
And then Gizmo tries to escape, and Christopher Lee grabs him. And throws him back in the cage. And he essentially says, like, oh, we're going to be running all kinds of tests on you. Then we're going to have to cut you open. And the only reason Billy finds out that Gizmo's in the building...
Tuco from Breaking Bad was humming his song.
Yes, and he's like, where'd you hear that? And he goes, oh, upstairs. Somebody was whistling it in the genetics lab. So Billy runs upstairs and has, like, a very thinly veiled excuse to get in. I forget what it is. Something about, like, fixing the copier or something.
Yeah.
I love when he opens the door to the lab, because you're expecting to see kind of like a normal-ish lab, but it just looks like a mad scientist's lab full of like different colored liquids and bubbling fluids and things. And there's a bit where they're injecting high-voltage liquid into cheese to power rats to then power radios.
Yes.
Which I was just like, oh, that's interesting.
I'm going to say you're laughing an awful lot for someone who supposedly kind of hated this movie.
I did kind of hate this movie, but I thought like there were parts of it that were just bizarre, and I did find kind of funny.
Again, this is all pre-Gremlins stuff too. This is all just kind of like
the
pre-Gremlins
stuff is the funnier gags. I think post-Gremlins is when it starts to get very tiring to watch, because it's just the kind of the same thing over and over again, and that same thing is just chaos. But anyways, Billy finds Gizmo, steals him, and he takes Gizmo back to his desk, and Clamp randomly shows up on their floor, and he's like perusing all these designs. This is when he has the line about getting rid of elm trees in Billy's painting, or in Billy's drawing, because people think of the Dutch and disease. He does like Billy when he meets him, and Marla, who was, I guess, like this Billy's supervisor or superior, whatever you want to call
Clearly
him.
named after Marla Maples, who Trump would have been with at the time.
Yes, yeah.
Trump's second wife. I don't know if they were married when this movie came out, but yeah.
But anyway, Marla, she's kind of cozying up to Billy because she sees that Clamp likes Billy, and there could be a future if she stays close to Billy.
So how do you feel about the Canadian restaurant?
Well, it made me chuckle.
I wanted more gags there. They weren't there. They didn't do that much with it.
When they show up to the restaurant, there's an auditory gag where they're like, Gretzky for 6?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Then so he was drinking Molson's, and then I think the only other joke was they brought over dessert, and the guy's like, "Oh, it's a guy dressed as a Mountie. The waiter's dressed as a Mountie," and he's like, "Oh, would you like a Canadian delicacy? It's chocolate mousse," and it's just like a mousse. It's just the head of a moose.
All right, so let's skip ahead to the actual Gremlins, because the only really thing that comes of this is there's a little bit of conflict in the relationship, and even though I said it's nice to see the two of them, Kate and Billy, back, it's really only in the beginning. I kind of like that they're like still dating and stuff. Like anything that actually happens among their characters as the movie progresses is like, who cares? And then the only other thing to add is that the Futtermans are in town visiting them. Otherwise, let's get to the Gremlin me.
So Gizmo is in the
Gizmo's
desk.
like tortured. He gets tortured by him.
Well, yeah, and they get created because the janitor sprays Gizmo with water while he's trying to
janitor played by John Astin.
Has other Mogwai, and they all look different. Like they're all black, and they have like white hair features. Like one has a mohawk, one has eyebrows, one has a beard and buck teeth.
The googly-eyed.
Well, yeah, the fourth Mogwai is brown and white, just like Gizmo, but he's got googly eyes, and he's like on coke or something, you know?
Mm-hmm. And that's the one Kate takes home because Billy says, hey, go pick up Gizmo. He's in the drawer, and then she sees him. He's goofing off, and she's like, oh, you seem... I mean, she doesn't know Gizmo. Gizmo is Billy's pet, you know?
Exactly.
She's just like, I get you're a little different, but I guess you're Gizmo.
The other Mogwai cram Gizmo into like an air duct and lock him in there behind a grate, and then they go off downstairs to the food court, and they're wreaking havoc in the food court. Like, well, they're not really wreaking havoc, but some people are like, oh my god, there's rats in the food. But it's just the Mogwai eating a bunch of food at the food court. Billy gets home and he goes, oh, hey, this stupid, dumb-looking gremlin Mogwai isn't Gizmo. We have to go back to the office and find Gizmo. So when they go back to the office, they go to the food court, and people are complaining about furry rats, and that's when they realize, oh my god, there's way more than just one or whatever, and we gotta find them. They start looking for them in like the direction that they ran off in. Billy gets taken in by security because he's caught on security camera, like trying to turn off like the main water supply to the building. But then the camera pans up and we see that the Mogwai are already in their gremlin cocoons. I think immediately, like, I guess it's the next day, the newly made gremlins start fiddling with the lights in the building. Billy heads upstairs to the control room where Robert Picardo is, and he's like, hey, there's these things called gremlins. He starts telling them all about them and all the rules about gremlins, which everybody in the control room is like, yeah, but what happens if he eats at 11 o'clock, but he's got a piece of corn stuck in his teeth, and he eats that after midnight? Then does that count? And as everybody's kind of making fun of Billy, a gremlin...
It's actually a very good jump scare.
It is, yeah. It shoots out of the control panel and starts attacking a guy sitting in the chair.
And then we just get gremlin chaos. We get the gremlins hiding in the pot, the microwave with Marge. Yeah. I love how she's drinking while on air.
Oh, yeah, all the sherry. Yeah.
And, so they're doing that thing, and then they put a bunch of metal in the microwave so it blows up. By
this point, he heads up to Clamp's office to warn him about gremlins, but his secretary's already been attacked. Clamp has fought this gremlin and shoved it.
Oh, this was kind of fun.
Yeah, like, it was actually surprising. Clamp is trying to fight this gremlin, and he just winds up shoving it into, like, this desktop shredder.
Mm-hmm.
And it just turns to goo and shoots all over Clamp.
Goop all over the place, yeah.
And then Clamp's like, hey, I'm too busy to deal with this. How about Robert Picardo and Billy deal with this? So they try to, but this is where, is this?
Oh, it's in Christopher Lee's lab, and then one of the gremlin drinks, like, brain-enhancing stuff, and then he can talk. Even though gremlins can already kind of talk, they just speak in, like, little words, like Pokemon.
Yeah, but, well... Yeah, but before that, like, we get that movie reviewer, right?
He's Leonard Maltin, yeah.
Yeah, and he's shitting on the original Gremlins. He's like, I don't know.
I'm assuming he gave a negative review to the original Gremlins, I guess. Leonard Maltin always seems to have a good sense of humor about himself. He appeared on Mystery Science Theater 3000 when one of the movies they featured had been positively reviewed by him, and they were giving him a hard time about that.
That's pretty funny.
So... yeah.
But yeah, he gets attacked by gremlins, and then they make their way into the lab, and you're right, the one drinks like a Brainiac juice, and he becomes really smart, and he starts talking like a Harvard graduate. Another one drinks bat juice and sprouts wings, and then the smart gremlin gives him genetic sunblock so he can fly outside, and as soon as he does, he busts through a window and creates the Batman bat logo hole in the window, which I thought was funny.
And then he attacks Dick Miller, and then and Dick Miller throws him in a bunch of cement, and then he flies away, and then he just becomes a gargoyle on top of the church. I remember that scene from when I was a kid. Yeah, that was the scene I remembered probably more than anything.
And that one's actually like a clever scene. The rest of this are just gremlins being chaotic. And at this point in the movie, they've essentially taken over the whole building. And Gizmo is being tortured by the Mohawk one. I think that's his name, right? Mohawk?
Yeah, it was Stripe in the first one. Mohawk.
Yeah, and like he's being put on a photocopier and hit by a toy train. But then we have like the biggest like third wall breaking gag of this movie, and it's so weird. Like the gremlins are doing things, and then Billy and Picardo run into Christopher Lee, and they're asking him, hey, where have you seen the gremlins? Where are they? And as Christopher Lee is trying to explain, the film reel kind of burns through, and then you just get like a white screen, like you're in a theater, and the gremlins are doing hand puppets on a theater screen, and then they replace the film with like an erotic movie of some kind, and then a woman like walks out of the theater and she's complaining to, what would you call him? Like he's not just staff, he's
Paul Bartel, famous Roger Corman, regular the theater manager.
Yeah, so she complains to him, and she's like, this movie's for children. And then the projectionist walks out of the booth, and he's covered in the film, and he's like, Gremlins took over the booth, and they're just yelling about wanting to watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Then the manager, he goes, I'll deal with this. He walks into the theater, finds fucking Hulk Hogan sitting there. This isn't even a joke. He finds Hulk Hogan sitting there, and he goes, Mr. Hogan, Gremlins have taken over the projectionist booth. Can you get them out of there? And Hulk Hogan stands up and starts doing his bit. You want to go with me, brother?
Yeah,
you think the Gremsters can beat the Hulkster? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and he rips his shirt off.
I'm tempted to say this is horribly dated, but in a weird way, Hulk Hogan is like a current figure because he was at the Republican convention and stuff. But like, this is so... First of all, the actual fourth wall break doesn't work for me. It might work if you saw this in the theater. It might be like kind of like, this is all about like, can you get that like, ah, like an annoyed sound happening in the movie, and then it's like, oh, they made a joke on you, the audience.
When they released this on VHS, they did it differently.
It was Mr. T. Wasn't it? Wasn't it Mr. T and not Hulk Hogan? I could have sworn I remember that.
You might be right, but I was going to say, like, because the only part I read was that instead of like the film being burnt away, they just had like they made it look like there was an error with the VCR and it was all fuzzy instead of the white screen, and then Gremlins were fooling around.
I don't know. I could have sworn it was Mr. T in the version I saw as a kid, unless it's like a Mandela effect thing. But yeah, the fact that it's just becomes like all that it leads to is just a Hulk Hogan cameo is just like, oh god, I don't care.
Yeah, and then he looks directly into the camera after he kind of scares the Gremlins, and he goes, sorry, folks, it won't happen again.
The one thing I did enjoy about this is when the theater manager is approaching him from behind, he's got his bandana on. Yeah. But you don't know it's Hulk Hogan. I know. And I thought it was like a Russian gypsy or something for a moment. There was a moment where it's just like, oh, it's just an old lady. Oh, it's Hulk Hogan.
Oh, yeah. It's the Hulkster. We get back into the movie, and Picardo, Billy, and Christopher Lee, they head into the lab where the Gremlins are just being wild. They're throwing acid. One of them turned into a lady gremlin by drinking a thing, and then one gremlin turns into literal electricity.
Yeah.
And he's bouncing around the room and stuff. Christopher Lee goes, oh, hey, I know how we can solve this. I keep firearms in this closet. And he opens the closet door and he puts his hand in, and a gremlin, he just starts eating his hand. And then I think the electricity gremlin shocks him to death.
Mm-hmm.
And then Picardo's chased away by the lady gremlin because she's coming on to him, and Picardo can't kick a 2.5 foot tall creature. And I don't remember what happens to Billy, but the next time we see him, he's like knocked out in like a dentist chair, isn't he?
Yeah, I think the Gremlins must capture him, I guess. But yeah, he's in the dentist chair. Who saves him from... Oh, it's Dick Miller, right? Yeah, because Dick Miller is outside after he's defeated the cement gremlin. He's trying to get into the building because he knows it's Gremlins. He knows what he needs to do, but they won't let him in. And then Clamp comes out of his like secret entrance, and then he just sneaks his way back in through that, and then he ends up saving Billy, yeah.
Oh, wait, yeah, sorry, I skipped ahead. Actually, that's my bad.
No, who the fuck cares?
Oh, okay.
This is a movie that, like, the plot doesn't matter. It's just gag movie. The order of events doesn't matter.
But I think one of the dumbest things is that Gizmo at the beginning of the movie was watching Rambo, and he likes Rambo, and then he starts plotting to take down Mohawk, so he starts, like, working out and wearing a red headband, like Rambo.
Also like Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, that's true. And then Mohawk drinks like a spider serum and becomes a spider gremlin. And Billy and Clamp come up with this idea to trick them out into the sunshine. At one point, Marla and Kate are captured by Spider Mohawk in a web, but Gizmo kills him in Rambo style with like a flaming arrow. There's like a weird scene about Lincoln, because like Futterman's here at this point. And they said something about President Lincoln, and Kate's like, oh, don't bring up Lincoln. There's this one time when I was a girl at a park.
That's a very odd moment. It seems like, I assume it's like a reference to her weird speech in that first movie about her dad dressing up as Santa and dying, climbing down through the chimney. But... because that's a really weird scene in that movie because it's delivered dramatically, but it's so silly. And this one, it's not delivered dramatically, but we also don't hear the full story because the movie just moves on from it. But I assume it's supposed to be like, we had that scene in this. Let's do a tongue-in-cheek version of that.
Well, to keep on chugging away, because this movie's almost over. Clamp's outside. All the gremlins are like in the lobby having like a New Year's Eve style party. And the talking gremlin is singing some Frank Sinatra or something. I don't know.
The only thing I'll add is we have skipped over the grandpa. He starts broadcasting and he interviews the intelligent gremlin.
Yeah, and he's like, what do you want?
And the reason I bring this up, I was watching these. I didn't sleep well Friday night. I woke up early Saturday morning. I rented the 2 movies. I watched them back to back. Got through Jurassic Park 3. And then, like, okay, I'll watch Gremlins 2. And I was, like, starting to nod off at some point. I think it was this scene. It was one of the intelligent gremlin scenes. I was just, like, starting to nod off. And then there's a gremlin talking in, like, a British accent. It's actually more of an Australian accent, I thought. And I'm like, is this real? I don't know. And then I just paused the movie for a few minutes and got back to it. It's like, oh, it is real. Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed Intelligent Gremlin, though. Like, he was kind of fun.
Yeah, well, because he kind of brought some order to the chaos that are gremlins.
Yeah, in his own way, he did, yes. I think they ask him, like, what is it that you want? And he gives, like, a philosophical answer, but it's just like, oh, we want what... And he's like, oh, we want equal rights or whatever. And he's just we want to be recognized as... Yeah, and it's like that's kind of fun for a gremlin to have that. That's not what all the gremlins want. The gremlins just want chaos, but like it's kind of fun that he gets to voice something like that about motivation.
Yeah, I agree. And also there's another scene that we skipped over that doesn't seem important but is at the end, where the electric gremlin gets caught in like one of the office phones in the building and is just stuck in this office phone.
I had forgotten about that. I had no idea where the climax was going because I completely forgot about that.
Billy and Clamp's plan to kill them with sunlight, their plan was to like artificially turn all the clocks ahead 3 hours so that the gremlins think it's nighttime, and then they would go out in the building and die in the sunlight. But that doesn't really work because as soon as Clamp is about to drop this big nighttime cityscape drape, there's a thunderstorm and it clouds over the sun. So Billy goes, okay, new plan, and he says, hey Futterman, go around the corner, get a fire hose and aim it into the lobby. And then he asks Kate, he goes, hey, can you transfer a call on hold from Clamp's office to the lobby? Futterman soaks these gremlins and they start kind of making new gremlins, and then he goes, okay, turn the water off, and he gets Kate to transfer the call, and the electricity gremlin shoots out of the phone into the lobby and just electrocutes all the gremlins, which literally melts them all.
There's a Wizard of Oz reference too.
Yeah. Yeah, the ones wearing the witch's hat. I'm melting. But yeah, then I don't know what happens to the electric gremlin, but that doesn't fucking matter. And they kind of save the day. Clamp runs in, because he's actually a good guy, and he likes Billy, and he runs in with like a bunch of police, and he finds them all dead. And that's pretty much where the movie ends. Kate and Billy take Gizmo home. Clamp is like the only person to have some kind of like character development in this movie. He kind of starts out as like...
he sort of is.
Yeah, and like he starts out as like this...
He acknowledges the smart skyscraper was dumb, that people don't want this. I don't think he ever has plans to not... Well, he already bulldozed Chinatown or whatever, so it's like, yes, that's going through. But he does acknowledge, he sees Billy's drawing of his hometown, and he's like, I'm going to build a town just like that, a quiet town that everyone's going to love.
But then he goes, this will be the biggest, quietest
town. Yeah, the biggest
town.
Small town. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, he still has the Trump, it's going to be the best town, I have the best towns.
Nobody's seen a town like my town. Biggest town. And he's like, oh, I want to get rid of all these cold surroundings, these steel surroundings, and make it warm. You know, that's like his thing. And then I guess the only other person that has any kind of development whatsoever is Robert Picardo, who is trapped in a bathroom in the upper floors with the lady gremlin, who is wearing a wedding dress and starts walking towards him giggling, and then he kind of like comes around to the idea and he slowly slides onto the floor, and that's the end of the movie. So Patrick, what did you think of Gremlins 2, The New Batch?
It's a difficult one because I don't really know what to make of it. I mean, overall, like I can't really say I liked it, but there's like a lot of things that I respect about it. I respect the attitude of Joe Dante to be like, I'm not making the same movie again. I'm making it just a wacky, I'm making a Warner Brothers cartoon, I'm making a Looney Tunes cartoon. I respect that. I don't really like it though. Kind of adding to that, the effects are amazing. The shots, the close-up shots of the gremlin backs, to my knowledge, those were like the Gremlins are, about 2 feet tall, but the close-up shots of the back when you see little gremlins forming, that was like a full size, like maybe 10-foot tall.
Oh, was it really?
Or so. Yeah, I think so. I'm assuming. Maybe I'm just thinking of a Nightmare on Elm Street 4, but that's what they do with the souls inside Freddy's body. But yeah, Rick Baker, the immense creativity. This movie couldn't have existed without him. But then again, I'm not really sure. I'm glad this movie exists. I don't like it. Aren't really the characters that you can connect with the way you can in the original. And the exception of one pretty good jump scare, there is nothing in this movie that's trying to be taken seriously as a horror movie, which is fine. They're going for a different tone, but like, it's just not a tone I like. Like, Gremlins had this like wonderful balance of, we still saw the gremlin chaos, but we had genuine tension in multiple scenes. And another thing too is that the original Gremlins, they burn down the movie theater or whatever and kill like a couple hundred gremlins that are inside there. They still have that showdown with their like main antagonist gremlin. We don't get anything like that. We have Mohawk as kind of the main one, but he's dispatched of, and there's still 20 minutes left or so, and there's just no like, the film tries to do a personal relationship between Gizmo and Mohawk, but then it just kind of like gives up on it, and I don't know. That might be a minor complaint. I'm not sure.
Well, it's okay. Because I think, like, at the end of the day, I think this movie's too silly to even be taken seriously. And it's too silly to watch, I think.
I mean, I did not have a good time watching it.
No, because again, it's so exhausting. Like, the gags are one thing. If they're clever audio or visual gags or whatever, that's one thing. But as soon as the Gremlins start doing gremlin-y things, it's just chaos for like an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's got that tone, or not even the tone, but it has the joke pacing of something like a Zucker Brothers comedy, but it just doesn't land in the same way.
Are you talking like pre-Gremlins? Or even like during like the post-Gremlins stuff?
Both, really. I mean, and I wonder how much of that is like, so much of what makes The Naked Gun and Airplane good is the straight delivery of Leslie Nielsen. Christopher Lee has a little bit of that, but for the most part, it's not. I mean, the deliverers of the joke are the Gremlins, who obviously aren't playing anything straight.
No, especially not the lady Gremlin.
There was a joke there. I just couldn't get there. Yeah, I don't care much for this movie.
No, and I agree. I'm not going to say it's like a terrible movie. I'm not going to say I hate it, because
I'm not even sure I can say it's a bad movie. It's just, it's not for me.
No, I agree. And
the way cartoons aren't for me.
Yeah. And I agree with you, though. Like, there are respectable... Like, I do have to respect Joe Dante for making this movie.
And Rick Baker, especially.
Yeah, oh, yes, yeah. And Rick Baker. Bad for us. We had to watch this movie. So, Patrick...
And what's worse for us is we had to watch the other movie. So, Jim...
Damn it.
Which do you prefer, Jurassic Park 3 or Gremlins 2, The New Batch?
I'll go with Jurassic Park 3. Even though I think it's also kind of like, it's definitely a crappy sequel. It just has, first off, it has dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Even just the dinosaurs alone.
Gremlins versus dinosaurs. I'm taking dinosaurs. 10 times out of 10.
And then even like, I feel like Jurassic Park 3, even though the characters were kind of shitty, I still think it has better characters than Gremlins 2, other than Fred Dracula and Mr. Futterman.
You didn't like Dr. Cushing catheter?
Oh, yeah, that's
According to
right,
Wikipedia, his first name's Cushing. I don't think they say it in the movie, but that's a fun little Peter Cushing thing.
Yeah, so those three aren't enough those 3 minor roles aren't enough to carry a 1 hour and 40-odd minute movie of Gremlins creating mayhem.
You didn't mention Gizmo. How do you feel about Gizmo as a character?
I like Gizmo. I don't have a problem with Gizmo. Every time I look at Gizmo, I just think of Furbies.
Sure.
I like Gizmo. I want a little Mogwai.
I liked him in the other movie more, and I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just toned down, or maybe he just interacts with Billy a lot more in that movie. Obviously.
Yeah, and in this movie,
he's barely with Billy in this movie.
He spends most of this movie being bullied, and then being a silly Rambo Mogwai.
Yeah, and the Rambo stuff doesn't work.
I just feel like he was more likable in the first one.
Well, I think so, but I think that's less his character and more who he was interacting with. Like, he doesn't interact that much with Billy in this movie.
No, you're right. Yeah. But yeah, definitely Jurassic Park. But, my friend, How do you think these two stack up as a double feature? And funny enough,
well,
I
gotta say
answer.
my. Well, you don't even know which movie I prefer.
Oh, well, let me guess. The kid who loves dinosaurs loves Gremlins 2 more than Jurassic Park.
I might. I don't know. It's a virtual tie because Jurassic Park 3, I still hate it, and my hatred for it outweighs its poor quality. I hate it because of what it is. Listen, the Pirates of the Caribbean sequels suck, but it's the same thing too. It's like I hate those movies so much because that first Pirates movie is basically perfect and the other ones just kind of shit on it. If those movies just existed by themselves, I would not hate them. I would think they're not very good, but whatever. The fact that we have Jurassic Park and then we have this, Jurassic Park in my top 4 favorite movies, and then we have this. It's like, imagine if we had a sequel to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it was The Ridiculous Six with Adam Sandler. I mean, no, that's too much. That's too much because that's Jurassic Park 3 is not that. But just like I think I'm going with Gremlins 2 just on
how dare you?
Like a personal. My conscience won't let me pick Jurassic Park 3. I might have actually enjoyed it more, but I am so married to my hatred of it that I couldn't possibly pick it.
But that being said, though, I mean, I know it is such a downgrade from the original Jurassic Park, but you're saying you'd rather watch Gremlins 2 than watch a kind of shitty movie about dinosaurs?
I don't know. Listen, it's got Christopher Lee. It's got
true.
Christopher Lee carrying a pod from Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, yeah.
It's got the good Casablanca joke. It's not completely irredeemable. I mean, I didn't enjoy it that much. We don't get to see Phoebe Cates' unfortunately. Which you don't in the original either. She dresses like a Quaker in that movie for some reason. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. It's a virtual tie for me. Like I don't care. So I'll just say Gremlins 2. You know what am I gonna do?
Fair enough. I get it. Like I'm in the same boat, but I just picked Jurassic Park. It's a toss-up.
Yep. So we don't really like either of these movies. So
no, I'm gonna say no.
Well,
no
yeah,
double
it's
feature.
not. It doesn't work as a double feature. Yeah, again, I've seen Jurassic Park 3 as part of a drive-in double feature. Me falling asleep during Pearl Harbor 2 and the projection screen breaking down might have been the better outcome than pairing it with Gremlins 2. For all I know. Yeah, I'm not feeling it.
No. And with that, what are we doing next week or next time?
Well, we picked our own movies this time. I already know what you picked because you told me about it, and it was a movie that you had told me about before because when I looked it up, I'm like, oh, I recognize that poster. You told me about it a long time ago. But you don't know what I picked. I picked a 1972 film, Across 110th Street. It's a blaxploitation film that I saw when I was a freshman in college, and I thought it was really good. And I have barely thought of it since, and I haven't seen it since. And I'm curious if it is that good. I don't know.
So, Across 110th Street from 1972,
correct. Starring Anthony Quinn and Yaphet Kotto, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay. I picked Branded to Kill, which is what, 1967 or something like that? It's from the 60s.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Believe it or not, another Japanese movie. It's about a guy who's part of the Yakuza, and he has to kind of go around and kill other Yakuza guys. And I saw it once when I was really, really sick with like a strep throat and a nasal
malaria
infection. Yeah. The flu's coming next week. But I saw it once when I was really, really sick, and I had fever dreams that night. Not about the movie, but I'd like to rewatch it.
About a velociraptor calling you by your name.
Actually, I had a fever dream that night of somebody breaking into my apartment.
Okay.
And I got up out of bed and I ran down my hallway in my apartment looking for somebody who was not in my apartment as I'm like dying of some sickness.
Okay. Interesting.
So I want to rewatch this movie not as a sick boy.
Okay. Perfectly fair. All right. So that's next time. Stay tuned.
Goodbye, everybody.